The wind, a biting lash, drove Alara's braid against her cheek as she crouched amongst the thyme and rosemary. The herb's pungent fragrance barely cut through the pervasive reek of wood smoke clinging to Oakhaven, a somber testament to dwindling resources and empty stomachs. Not for herself did she toil, but to gather tribute for old man Tiberius, the village sage, hoping for a pittance of grain in return. Well, well, look what crawled out of its hole. A voice drawled. Elara knew the speaker without looking. Gareth, a lummox of a lad with fists like granite and a sneer perpetually etched into his features. He was ever the ringleader of torment aimed her way. Beside him, Willow, her expression a tightrope walk between shame and false amusement, nervously worried her worn skirt's hem. Brewing up some potions, Silver Eyes? Gareth persisted, his voice laced with venom. Planning to taint the well again? Elara ignored him, carefully clipping a sprig of rosemary. The less notice she attracted, the sooner they'd be gone. Yet, disregarding Gareth was akin to swatting away midges. Pa reckons you're jinxed, Gareth continued, scuffing the earth near her hand. Claims your eyes are an omen, a mark of the shadows that swallowed your kin. The words landed like a physical blow. Her breath caught, and the carefully erected defenses around her heart threatened to crumble. She clutched her worn basket's handle, knuckles bone white. Willow fidgeted. Gareth, quit it, she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Gareth scoffed. What? Developing a soft spot for the cursed brat, Willow? Don't forget what Tiberius warned. He swung back to Elara, eyes narrowed to slits. Everyone knows your parents had it coming, poking their noses where they didn't belong. Elara rose sharply, scattering her collected herbs. Her silver eyes, usually averted, blazed with a defiance she rarely permitted herself. They were good souls, she declared, her voice tremulous but firm. Better than anyone here. Gareth advanced, fists clenching. Take that back, you weirdo. Before he could reach her, a voice resonated from the copse's edge. Gareth, leave her be. Old man Tiberius, his face a tapestry of disapproval, shuffled towards them, leaning heavily on his knotty staff. Gareth, visibly irked by the interruption, relented, muttering under his breath. Elara? Tiberius said, his voice now gentler, though maintaining a cautious distance. Come with me. I require those herbs. Elara nodded, avoiding Gareth's spiteful glare. She quickly retrieved what she could of the scattered plants, and trailed Tiberius toward the village, Willow lingering behind, her face a portrait of regret. As they walked, Elara's thoughts traveled to a time before the whispers, before the dread, before the vanishing. She recalled her father's booming laugh resonating through their tiny cottage, the scent of beeswax and smoldering wood permeating the air as he fashioned intricate toys for her. She remembered her mother's soothing touch, teaching her the names of the constellations and the lore of the woods, her silver eyes mirroring Elara's, but brimming with warmth and love, not the suspicion and fear she now saw in the villagers' gaze. They had been happy, self-sufficient in their secluded lives, until they disappeared, consumed by the forest without a trace, leaving Elara to shoulder their absence and the villagers' baseless accusations. The memory was a keen, aching reminder of what had been lost, a stark contrast to the bleak reality of her present. They reached Tiberius's small, crammed dwelling. The air within hung heavy with the scent of dried plants and settled dust. Tiberius motioned for her to place the herbs on a wobbly table. Thank you, Elara, he said, his tone lacking its habitual cordiality. I am grateful for your assistance. Elara nodded again, knowing the gratitude was as empty as the assurances the villagers made to aid in finding her parents. There has been unrest within the village, Tiberius continued, his gaze riveted on the herbs. Concerns regarding your presence. Elara's heart plummeted. She had foreseen this. The whispers had grown louder, the stares more piercing. I understand, she responded quietly, her voice barely audible. Tiberius sighed, raking a hand through his thinning hair. Your eyes, Elara. They unnerve others. They are a harsh reminder of the fate of your parents. He didn't need to elaborate. Everyone suspected her parents' disappearance was her doing, a consequence of her cursed eyes. I cannot alter them, Elara said, her voice tinged with a bitterness she failed to restrain. I know, child, I know, Tiberius replied, his voice thick with fatigue. But you must comprehend. The village, they are in fear. Fear can drive people to commit dreadful acts. He looked at her then, his eyes filled with a blend of pity and something else, something that hinted at undisguised fear. "There is talk, chatter of requesting you to depart," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Ilara's breath snagged in her chest. Leave? Where could she go? The forest, though familiar, was unforgiving. And beyond Oakhaven she knew nothing. I have nowhere else to turn," she stammered, her voice faltering. Tiberius averted his eyes, unable to meet her gaze. "I know, child, but I must consider the village, I must safeguard them." He reached into a small pouch and retrieved a handful of grain, pressing it into her hand. "Take this, it is all I can offer." Ilara stared at the grain, her stomach twisting with a mixture of emptiness and despondency. It would barely sustain her for a handful of days. "Thank you," she said, her voice devoid of inflection. She turned to leave, her shoulders slumped with defeat. As she reached the doorway, she heard Tiberius clear his throat. "Ilara," he said, his voice gaining a sudden urgency. "Be wary. There are murmurs in the forest, things are astir. Something unnatural." Ilara paused, her heart hammering in her chest. What did he mean? What malevolent forces? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a bare thread. But Tiberius offered no explanation. He simply shook his head, his eyes reflecting a fear mirroring her own. Ilara stepped from the hut into the encroaching dusk, the burden of the village's bias and the elder's ominous pronouncement weighing upon her like a tangible load. Willow awaited her just outside, her face etched with shame. "Ilara, I am so sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't want them to say those things." Ilara looked at her, her silver eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. She knew Willow's apology was sincere, but it changed nothing. Willow was too afraid to stand against the crowd, too afraid to risk the village's censure. "It's all right, Willow," Ilara said, her voice weary. "It is of no consequence." She turned and walked away, leaving Willow standing alone in the fading light. As she made her way toward her small ramshackle cottage on the village's fringe, she could hear the distant drone of voices, the unsettling sound of a community united in its anxiety and distrust. Later that night, as the moon painted long skeletal shadows across the forest floor, Ilara sat by the fading embers of her hearth, the meager handful of grain clutched tightly in her hand. The wind howled outside, rattling the cottage's windows and whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. She thought of her parents, of their affection and their laughter, of the cherished memories now tainted by the villagers' accusations and the mystery of their demise. She thought about Tiberius's warning, about the unnatural entities stirring in the forest, and she knew, with a bone-chilling certainty, that her life in Oakhaven was drawing to a close. Whether she was forced to flee or something far more sinister awaited her, she didn't know. But she knew that the forest, the very forest that had claimed her parents, was now calling to her, beckoning her toward an uncertain future. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Ilara felt a flicker of something other than dread. It was a spark of defiance, a glimmer of possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, she could uncover answers in the shadows. Answers that would finally reveal the truth about her parents and the meaning of her silver eyes. Banished. Heavy raindrops smacked Ilara's palm, jolting her. Driven by Tiberius's grim warning and a persistent hunger that gnawed at her insides, she'd strayed deeper into the whisperwood than prudence dictated. The miserly ration he'd provided was dwindling fast. Sustenance had to be found, and quickly. The morning had been heavy with a preternatural calm, a suffocating closeness that presaged a downpour. Now, the threat was materializing. A curse escaped Ilara's lips. She was on the cusp of reaching a cluster of glowroot, prized for its healing properties, a valuable trade commodity. But the impending tempest threatened to obliterate them, turning the forest floor into a treacherous quagmire. She began to excavate with growing desperation, her fingers coated in slick earth. The wind escalated, thrashing her hair against her face, the icy rain needling her skin. A deep guttural rumble of thunder reverberated through the trees, closer, more threatening now. She managed to wrest a few handfuls of the luminescent roots from the soil, their faint radiance barely visible against the encroaching gloom, when a searing flash of lightning ripped across the heavens, followed by a deafening report that seemed to fracture the very bedrock beneath her. Ilara recoiled, scattering some of her prize. Another blaze of light, Another concussive boom, and then, the unmistakable tearing shriek of sundered wood. A venerable oak, ancient and knotted, one of the silent sentinels guarding the Whisperwood's border, had taken a direct hit. It plummeted earthward with devastating force, its limbs ripping through the undergrowth like the talons of some colossal beast. Raw panic overwhelmed Alara. She lurched to her feet, clutching the remaining glowroot, and bolted, the image of the toppled giant branded onto her memory. She knew how highly the villagers regarded those ancient trees. By the time she stumbled into Oakhaven, the storm had erupted into a frenzy. Rain hammered down in relentless torrents, transforming the dirt paths into churning streams of mud. The wind howled like a banshee, clawing at the thatched roofs. Alara hastened toward her ramshackle hut, seeking the paltry shelter it offered. But as she neared the village square, she encountered a scene of turmoil. Villagers huddled together, their faces masks of apprehension and ire. Gareth, his features twisted in rage, jabbed a trembling finger in her direction. "There she is," he bellowed, his voice a ragged shout swallowed by the storm's fury. "The witch, she's cursed us all." Alara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. What was happening here? They swiveled as one, their gazes poisoned with suspicion and animosity. Old man Tiberius stood foremost, his face drained of color. He regarded Ilara with a sorrowful dread. "Ilara," he began, his voice quavering. "The storm, the oak, the harvest."
"What about the harvest?"
Ilara managed, her voice a thread. "Ruined." A woman shrieked from within the crowd. "Hailstones have obliterated everything. We face starvation this winter." "It's her," Gareth roared, surging forward. "She's brought this calamity upon us. Her cursed eyes, her unnatural ways. She's incensed the spirits of the wood." The crowd surged as one, faces contorted with fury. Ilara instinctively flinched back, clutching the glowroot tighter to her chest. "No," she cried. "I did nothing. It was simply a storm." But her words were swallowed by the growing tide of anger and dread. "Witch," they chanted, a ragged chorus of condemnation. "Witch! Witch!" Willow, a companion from childhood, stood at the edge of the mob, her features a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Alara reached out to her, silently begging for support. "Willow, please, tell them I would never intentionally harm them." Willow's eyes shimmered with tears. She opened her mouth, but Gareth seized her arm, his grip constricting. "Don't defend her, Willow," he hissed. "She is dangerous. She'll bring ruin upon us all." Willow wavered, her gaze darting between Alara and the wrathful faces of the villagers. The pressure was overwhelming, her shoulders sagged in surrender. I don't know, Alara," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Maybe it's for the best if you leave." Ilara's heart fractured. Betrayed by her sole confidante, a wave of despair threatened to engulf her. She knew then that there was no logic to be found here, no plea that would sway them. Fear had transformed them into a ravenous beast. Tiberius advanced, his face carved with regret. He raised his hands, quelling the crowd's advance. "Enough!" he commanded, his voice regaining a semblance of authority. "We cannot allow this blight to fester within our village. We must safeguard ourselves." He fixed Ilara with a gaze of sorrowful resignation. "Ilara, in accordance with the ancient tenets of Oakhaven, and for the preservation of our people, you are hereby banished from this village. You must depart immediately, and never return." Ilara stared at him, stunned. Banished? Cast out into the wilderness? Where would she turn? How could she possibly survive? But where am I to go?" she pleaded. "I have nowhere." "That is no longer our concern," Tiberius retorted, his voice devoid of warmth. "You have until sunrise to vacate Oakhaven. Should you remain beyond that hour, we shall take matters into our own hands." He turned away, signaling the dispersal of the villagers. The throng slowly dissolved, their faces a somber tapestry of relief and remorse. Gareth shot Ilara a venomous glare, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Willow edged toward Ilara, her face stained with tears. "Ilara, I am so deeply sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted this." Ilara met her gaze, her eyes brimming with hurt and disillusionment. "I believed we were friends, Willow," she said softly. Willow reached to touch her arm, but Ilara recoiled. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling. Just leave me be." Willow's features crumpled, she spun and fled, melting back into the crowd. Ilara remained alone in the deluge, the glow root clutched tightly within her grasp. Banished, abandoned, she possessed nothing. As the villagers sought refuge in their homes from the tempest's wrath, Ilara stumbled back towards her shack, the burden of her solitude crushing her spirit. She knew she could not linger. She had to leave, to venture into the unknown, to confront whatever perils lay ahead. But as she gathered her meager possessions, a threadbare blanket, a dull knife, and the remaining glow root, a spark of defiance ignited within her. She would not allow them to break her, she would endure. And one day she would unearth the truth about her lineage, about her peculiar eyes, about the curse that had shadowed her existence. As the first tendrils of dawn painted the sky a bruised violet, Ilara stood on the periphery of Oakhaven, her back turned to the village that had shunned her. She cast one final glance at the place she had once known as home, her heart a tempest of grief and indignation. Then she turned and began her trek toward the Whisperwood, the shadowy, enigmatic forest that had always held a strange allure. This time, however, she had no alternative but to surrender to its mysterious depths. Her journey had begun. Into the Whisperwood, the last rays of the setting sun bled across the Oakhaven Valley, painting the familiar thatched roofs in hues of orange and regret. Ilara stood at the edge of the Whisperwood, the gnawing ache in her stomach mirroring the emptiness in her chest. This was it, the threshold of her new life, a life she hadn't chosen. She turned, one last time, to face the village. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, a comforting sight that now felt like a betrayal. The sounds of laughter and evening chores drifted on the breeze, each note a tiny shard of glass piercing her heart. Her gaze lingered on the small, crooked cottage where she had spent her entire life, the scent of her mother's lavender still clinging faintly to the air. It felt like a lifetime ago, before the storm, before the accusation, before Willow's averted eyes. A sob caught in her throat, a raw, animal sound that ripped through the fragile silence. She pressed a hand to her mouth, desperate to contain the flood of grief threatening to overwhelm her. This wasn't a noble departure, a courageous exile. It was a desperate scramble for survival, fueled by fear and the bitter taste of injustice. With a final, shuddering breath, Ilara turned her back on Oakhaven and stepped into the Whisperwood. The air changed immediately. Gone was the gentle breeze, the scent of wild flowers and hearth smoke. Here, the air was heavy, still, and carried the faint, metallic tang of damp earth and decaying leaves. The canopy above was a dense, interwoven tapestry of branches, blocking out the last vestiges of sunlight. It was twilight within the Whisperwood, a perpetual state of fading light that seemed to dampen sound and amplify shadows. Ilara hesitated, her hand instinctively reaching for the small worn knife tucked into her belt. The silence was unsettling, a stark contrast to the vibrant hum of life she was accustomed to. There were no bird song, no rustling of small animals, no gentle whisper of wind through leaves. Only a profound, unnerving stillness that pressed in on her from all sides. She took a tentative step forward, the soft earth cushioning her footfall. The trees were ancient, their gnarled trunks thick with moss and lichen, their branches twisted into grotesque shapes that resembled reaching claws. They seemed to watch her, their silent judgment palpable in the oppressive air. Deeper and deeper she went, the path ahead dissolving into a maze of tangled roots and fallen logs. Fear, cold and sharp, began to gnaw at the edges of her resolve. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She imagined eyes watching her from the darkness, unseen creatures lurking just beyond the periphery of her vision. Hours blurred into a timeless, disorienting journey. The initial grief began to give way to a dull, aching exhaustion. Her legs burned, her throat was parched, and the gnawing hunger in her stomach had become a constant, throbbing pain. She had eaten the last of her meager supplies, a handful of dried berries, before entering the woods, hoping to find something, anything, to sustain her. Just as despair threatened to consume her entirely, a break in the trees appeared ahead. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from within, beckoning her forward. With a surge of hope, she stumbled towards the light, pushing through a curtain of thick, thorny vines. The vines opened into a hidden glade, a small, circular clearing bathed in an otherworldly luminescence. The source of the light was immediately apparent: strange glowing plants, unlike anything Alara had ever seen. They grew in clusters, their slender stems topped with bioluminescent blossoms that pulsed with a soft rhythmic light. The air here was different, lighter, infused with a sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance. Alara gasped, her weariness momentarily forgotten. The glade was an oasis of beauty in the heart of the oppressive forest, a haven of light and life amidst the encroaching darkness. She stepped into the clearing, her eyes wide with wonder. The glowing plants were of varying sizes and colors. Some were a deep, vibrant blue, their blossoms shaped like delicate bells. Others were a fiery orange, their petals fringed with golden light. And still others were a soft, ethereal white, their glow so intense they seemed to shimmer in the air. As she moved closer, she noticed that the plants were not the only source of light. The ground itself seemed to glow faintly, as if the soil was imbued with the same magical energy. Small, luminous insects flitted amongst the plants, their bodies leaving trails of shimmering dust in the air. Alara knelt down, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch one of the glowing blossoms. It felt cool and smooth to the touch, its surface radiating a gentle warmth. As she held it, she felt a strange sensation, a tingling energy that flowed through her fingertips and into her body. It was invigorating, revitalizing, like a drink of pure, clean water after days of thirst. A sense of profound peace washed over her, easing the pain and fear that had been her constant companions. Here, in this hidden glade, she felt safe, protected, as if the whisperwood itself was embracing her. But even as she savored the moment of tranquility, a flicker of unease stirred within her. This place was too perfect, too beautiful. It felt unnatural. She remembered the warnings she had heard as a child, whispered tales of the whisperwood and its hidden dangers. Tales of alluring illusions, of creatures that lured travelers to their doom with false promises of safety and comfort. Could this glade be one of those illusions, a trap disguised as a sanctuary? She looked around the clearing, her eyes scanning the shadows that lurked at the edges of the light. The silence was still profound, but now it felt different, heavier, laden with an unspoken threat. The air, once sweet and intoxicating, now carried a faint, metallic tang, a reminder of the decaying leaves and damp earth that lay beneath the surface. The glow of the plant seemed to intensify, their light pulsing with a faster, more frantic rhythm. She could almost hear a whisper, a faint, ethereal voice that seemed to emanate from the plants themselves. It spoke her name, or at least, she thought it did. It was difficult to be sure, the sound was so faint, so elusive. Alara? She stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. The sense of peace had vanished, replaced by a growing sense of dread. This place was not a sanctuary. It was something else, something ancient and powerful, something that was watching her, waiting for her. She had to leave, now. With a sudden burst of energy she turned and fled, pushing through the thorny vines and back into the darkness of the whisperwood. The glowing glade receded behind her, its ethereal light fading into the distance. But the whisper, the faint, ethereal voice followed her, echoing in her mind long after she had left the clearing behind. Alara. As she ran, stumbling blindly through the undergrowth, she knew that she had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The whisperwood was not just a forest. It was a place of secrets, a place of magic, a place where the lines between reality and illusion blurred, and she, Alara of Oakhaven, was now caught in its web. The Black Wolf. The whisperwood constricted around Alara, a heavy shroud of evergreens and gloom. Each susurrus of leaves mimicked a pursuing murmur. Each branch snap echoed like an accusing judgment. A hollow ache devoured her stomach, a persistent thrum that sharpened the pain behind her eyes. Not since the sparse berry breakfast, before the torrent of accusations, the villagers' faces twisted by fear and animosity, her expulsion and branding as anathema, had she tasted food. Her legs shuddered with each stride, threatening collapse. The glade's false promise had only deepened her weariness. Driven by a fervent need to outrun the haunting visages and stinging words, she pressed onward. At last she stumbled upon a small pool, its surface a mirror reflecting slivers of sun that pierced the canopy. The water appeared murky, nearly opaque, yet desperation trumped caution. Ignoring the mud seizing her tattered clothes, She crawled to the edge and plunged her face into the liquid coolness. Never had anything tasted so pure, so reviving. She drank deeply, allowing the water to ease her scorched throat and expunge the acrid taste of fear. The perpetual hunger waned for a moment, displaced by a fragile spark of hope. As she sat back, brushing her mouth, she became aware of him. He stood cloaked in shadows at the wood's edge, a magnificent creature sculpted from pure night. An ebony wolf, dwarfing any she had previously encountered or envisioned. His fur drank the light, rendering him spectral, but it was his gaze that ensnared her. Eyes of startling, keen cerulean, like fragments of glacial ice, seemed to penetrate her, bypassing fear and exhaustion, delving into her very core. He offered no snarl, no growl. He simply observed, his focus unwavering. Alara froze, every muscle coiled, poised for flight at the merest hint of threat, but he remained motionless, a silent guardian in the deepening twilight. She recalled tales, of course. Whispers of wolves within the Whisperwood, some painted as protectors, others as relentless predators. She had dismissed them as mere fables to frighten children. However, confronting this regal, enigmatic creature, a primal fear seized her, a deeply ingrained intuition that she stood before something ancient and immensely powerful. She rose slowly, her legs protesting with sharp needles of discomfort. Her eyes remained riveted on the wolf, prepared to bolt at the smallest provocation. I mean no harm, she stammered, her voice shaky. I only needed water. No reaction. He remained utterly still, his cerulean gaze fixed upon hers. Alara retreated a step, then another. She sought to avoid provoking him, giving him any cause to strike. Such a beast could easily overpower her, but as she moved, a wave of giddiness overwhelmed her. Her vision swam and the forest floor seemed to pitch beneath her. The hunger, the weariness, the terror, it was all consuming. She reached out, seeking a tree trunk for support, but her fingers grasped only air. She faltered, her knees giving way, and she crumpled to the earth. As she lay gasping, she saw the wolf stir, not to attack. He merely stepped from the shadows into the scattered sunlight. He was even more immense than she realized, his powerful frame radiating both strength and elegance. He approached deliberately, carefully, his cerulean eyes never wavering from hers. Alara strained to rise, to escape, but her strength was depleted. She could only lie there, vulnerable, awaiting her fate. The wolf halted a few feet away. He lowered his head, testing the air around her, his breath warm against her face. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the assault. But it never came. Instead, a curious tranquility washed through her. The fear clutching her heart loosened, giving way to a sensation of serenity? It defied logic. Terror should grip her, yet she felt strangely soothed. She opened her eyes to find the wolf regarding her, his cerulean gaze holding an expression she couldn't decipher. Neither aggression nor hunger nor simple curiosity resided there, something deeper. An understanding? She lost track of time, staring into the wolf's eyes. Reality compressed to the creature before her, the inexplicable peace enveloping her, and the encroaching night painting the wood in hues of violet and charcoal. Ultimately, fatigue conquered her. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she surrendered to the embrace of sleep. As she slipped into unconsciousness, she retained a fleeting sense of the wolf gently nudging her with his muzzle, as if to offer reassurance. Then darkness claimed her. When Alara awoke, sunlight streamed through the branches. She lay upon a bed of soft moss, the air infused with the aroma of pine and damp soil. She felt improved. Not healed, but stronger than she had in days. The persistent hunger remained, yet diminished, less demanding. She sat up slowly, wincing at the ache in her muscles. Surveying her surroundings, she realized she remained near the pool, but no longer alone. The ebony wolf sat a short distance away, observing her with those keen cerulean eyes. He was alert, yet relaxed, as if he had stood guard throughout the night. Gazing at him, she noticed others. Lurking behind him, partially concealed by shadows, stood two more wolves. One, clad in gray, possessed eyes the color of amber. The other, light brown, nearly gold, bore green eyes. Both were smaller than the black wolf, yet larger than any wolf encountered in Oakhaven. A pack, and they watched her. A jolt of fear coursed through Alara. but the memory of the serenity preceding sleep swiftly suppressed it. She recalled the wolf's gentle nudge, the strange comprehension within his gaze. She drew a deep breath, seeking to calm her racing pulse. She understood her peril, that these wolves could easily end her life if they desired, yet something cautioned that they would not. Something signaled their difference. Slowly she rose, never breaking eye contact with the black wolf. Uncertain what to do or say, she realized she was utterly at his mercy. "Thank you," she managed, her voice still raspy. For not harming me." The wolf remained silent. He simply continued to observe her, his cerulean gaze unwavering. Alara waited, her heart hammering in her chest, unsure of the next event. She had no explanation for her spared life, but she knew she lived, and for the present she was shielded. The wolf inclined his head slightly, as if weighing her words. Then, he turned and moved towards the trees, the two other wolves following closely. Pausing at the edge of the shadows, he glanced back at Alara once more before vanishing into the forest. Alara remained motionless, watching them depart, her mind reeling. What significance did it hold? Why had they spared her? What did they desire? The answers eluded her. One truth remained. Her existence was irrevocably altered. No longer merely an outcast, a pariah. Now, she was something novel, something distinct. And she sensed that her journey had barely commenced. King Kale Earth, still slick from the prior night's drizzle, clung to Alara's worn cloak as she stirred. The air, redolent with pine wood and a feral musk that prickled her nose, pressed down on her. Sunlight, fragmented by the dense leaf cover overhead, stung her eyes as she opened them. The forest floor, typically a disarray of shed foliage and decaying timber, was oddly clear in her immediate vicinity. A patrol sweep, courtesy of the pack, no doubt. A guttural rumble echoed close by. A jolt of fear. Was their protection faltering? Was she to become the hunted? Slowly, cautiously, she turned, her gaze locking onto the unwavering cerulean eyes of the massive obsidian wolf. He remained a few paces distant, posture rigid, attention absolute. The sentinel had held his post. The other pack members, dispersed along the edges, were phantom guardians, melting into the shadows. The wolf, a ripple of muscle beneath sable fur, pushed to his paws. A tentative step forward, then another. Alara recoiled, bracing, but the assault never materialized. Instead, he halted several feet away, head cocked, as if attempting to plumb her very essence. He lowered his muzzle, sampling the air around her, seeking to unravel her secrets. An odd pulse emanated from him, a tangible force that raised gooseflesh on her arms. It was an alien sensation, a primal, unbridled power that resonated deep within her marrow. Then, the impossible unfolded. The atmosphere crackled with unseen energy, the pine fragrance intensified, and an incandescent blaze erupted around the wolf. Alara squeezed her eyelids shut, fending off the sudden glare. When she finally risked opening them, the wolf had vanished. A man stood in his place. Towering and powerfully built, he possessed broad shoulders tapering to a trim waist. Hair the color of a moonless night cascaded in thick, disobedient waves to his shoulders. His features were sharply etched, with prominent cheekbones and a resolute jaw. But it was his gaze that ensnared her. The same piercing blue that had guarded her as a wolf, now narrowed with a blend of astonishment and something veiled, something indecipherable. Naked, the transformation having shredded his garments, he betrayed no self-consciousness. He stood with regal bearing, exuding an authority that both intimidated and inspired. This was no mere mortal. He was a sovereign in his own right. He advanced a step, his gaze never breaking from hers. "Who are you?" His voice, deep and resonant, carried the weight of command. Alara swallowed hard, her throat suddenly parched. I am Alara," she managed, her voice a mere exhalation. He arched a brow, his expression unreadable. Alara, a name unfamiliar to the Whisperwood. A beat, his eyes scrutinizing her face, lingering on her unusual irises. "You are not of the forest kin?" "No," she confessed, her gaze falling to the loamy ground. I was exiled." "Exiled?" He closed the distance, his very presence filling her vision. "By whom?" "The village of Oakhaven," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. They accused me of sorcery." Silence descended, his eyes drilling into hers, seemingly attempting to pierce through artifice and reach her core. Sorcery, he finally uttered, a subtle note of skepticism coloring his tone. And do you practice such arts? No, Alara exclaimed, her eyes pleading for credence. I swear, I have never... He cut her off with a dismissive wave. I detect something distinct about you, Alara, he countered, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. A power, perhaps latent, yet undeniably there. He reached out, his fingertips gently tracing the line of her jaw. His touch sparked a tremor through her. Your eyes, he murmured, his gaze locked on hers. They hold the shade of moonlight on snow. Only legends speak of such a hue. Legends? Alara inquired, curiosity overriding her trepidation. What legends? He hesitated, his expression darkening. Tales of a forgotten lineage, he responded, his voice low and somber. A lineage intertwined with the very heartwood of the Whisperwood. He retreated a pace, severing the contact, but his gaze remained fixed, unwavering. Tell me, Alara, he urged, his voice imbued with a newfound intensity. What do you recall of your parents? Alara frowned, perplexed by the abrupt shift in subject. My mother tended to the sick, she replied. My father, he worked as a lumberjack. They were ordinary people. Ordinary, he scoffed, shaking his head. There is nothing ordinary about you, Alara. Your eyes, they betray a heritage far more significant than you comprehend. He circled her deliberately, like a predator assessing its quarry. The silvered eyes, they are the hallmark of the Shadowborn. Alara gasped, stumbling backward. Shadowborn? Those are just tales, bedtime stories to frighten children. Are they? KL ceased his circling, pinning her with an intense stare. The Shadowborn were the protectors of the Whisperwood, guardians charged with maintaining equilibrium between light and shadow. They commanded formidable power, able to manipulate the very essence of darkness. But they were routed, Alara protested. Hunted and eradicated. It was said they unleashed the Shadow Blight. Kale's features hardened. That is the fabrication they propagate. The Shadowborn were not the source of the blight. They fought against it, sacrificing everything to contain its spread. Then, what became of them? Alara asked, her mind reeling from the revelation. They suffered betrayal, Kyle said, his voice thick with resentment. At the hands of those who feared their might, those who sought to dominate the Whisperwood for their own selfish ends. They were branded as villains, their reputations sullied, their legacy obliterated. He paused, his gaze softening as it rested on her. And now, he said, it appears their blood courses through your veins. Alara stared at him, her thoughts struggling to assimilate the information bombarding her. She? A Shadowborn? An impossibility. And yet, the intensity of his gaze, the manner in which he spoke of her eyes, she couldn't dismiss the inexplicable connection she felt to this man, this Wolf King. Who are you? She managed, her voice barely audible. What are you? He met her gaze, his blue eyes reflecting a sorrow that spanned generations. I am Kael, he responded, King of the Whisperwood, and like you, Alara, I am among the last of my kind. The Protector's line. Deep lines etched themselves into Kael's forehead above eyes, the clear blue of a summer sky. Oakhaven cast you out? On what grounds? Alara winced, the jeering faces of the villagers surfacing, the brand searing her flesh like a new injury. Clutching herself, she tried to conjure warmth against a chill that went deeper than skin. Witchcraft, she breathed, the word a shard of glass in her mouth. They blamed my eyes, for misfortune. Kael's focus sharpened, fixing on her. Eyes like polished silver are not a hex, Alara, but a badge. A badge of what? She whispered, hope, tentative as a fledgling stirring within her. Could there be justification for the ostracism, the whispers, the dread? Of the Guardians, Kael proclaimed, his tone carrying the weight of ages. The Shadowborn, who watched over the Whisperwood for centuries, before fear took hold, before the festering shadow blight. Confusion clouded Alara's features. I don't understand. Mother never breathed a word of any Guardians. Time conceals uncomfortable truths, Kael murmured, a shadow of sorrow dimming his gaze. The Guardians faded into legend, their blood thinned, their purpose warped by terror and ignorance. But ancestry whispers, Alara. It resonates in your very core, as it does in mine. He swept a hand toward the arboreal giants, their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers against the fading light. This forest, It's more than timber and beasts. It's a threshold, a crossroads where realities converge, where the barrier weakens. The Guardians were entrusted with protecting this juncture, maintaining equilibrium between worlds. A crossroads? Elara echoed, her thoughts in turmoil. She had always felt an inexplicable pull toward this wood, a bond both alluring and frightening. Could this be the explanation? Aye, Kael affirmed. To realms beyond imagining, some pulse with beauty, vibrant life, and potent magic. Others are best left undisturbed. The Guardians stood as a bulwark, halting the encroachment of darkness. He paused, his expression hardening. But their ranks dwindled, their wisdom eroded, and fear enabled the blight to sink its roots. Alara's pulse quickened. She'd heard grim tales of the blight, a creeping corruption that poisoned the land, twisting creatures into horrific mockeries. Villagers spoke of it in fearful murmurs, indicting the Whisperwood, the arcane power they believed resided within. The blight, is it tied to this threshold? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. It's a manifestation of imbalance, Kael elucidated. A consequence of neglecting the crossroads, of allowing malignancy to fester unchecked. The Guardians maintained stability, but with their decline, the darkness has burgeoned. He closed the distance between them, his gaze burning with an intensity that stole her breath. Your forebears, Alara, were the bastion against that creeping blackness. They possessed the gift to perceive shifts in the veil, to mold the Whisperwood's energies, to rejuvenate the land and repel the horrors that sought to exploit the gateway. But I can't do any of that, Alara countered, desperation coloring her tone. I'm just Alara, a silver-eyed pariah who can't even coax a flame without scorching herself. A ghost of a smile touched Kael's lips. The strength sleeps within you, Alara. It requires awakening, cultivation. You have only just arrived. Your potential remains untapped. He extended a hand, hovering just above hers. His touch, when it came, was surprisingly delicate, a jolt of raw energy coursing through her, an alien yet strangely familiar sensation, like rediscovering a forgotten home. The Guardian blood runs deep within you. Kael affirmed, his voice gentle yet resolute. I can feel it, and I believe, Alara, that you hold the key to restoring balance, to repelling the blight, to securing this crossroads. Alara gaped at him, her mind struggling to reconcile with the magnitude of his revelation. She, an outcast, a supposed sorceress, was now being told she was descended from guardians of a magical gateway, that she possessed latent abilities. It was overwhelming. But why me? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why now? Why not someone else? A softer light entered Kael's eyes. Because, Alara, fate often favors the improbable. Because the whisper would beckon to you, as it once beckoned to me, generations ago. Because you possess the eyes of a guardian, eyes that perceive beyond the mundane, eyes that can penetrate the shadows. He withdrew his hand, giving her space to absorb his words. The forest seemed to pause, awaiting her response. The wind whispered through the leaves, murmuring secrets in a tongue she only partially understood. Tell me more about these guardians, she requested, her voice gaining conviction. Tell me of their powers, their heritage, their communion with the Whisperwood. Kael nodded, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. Come, he invited, gesturing toward a faint path snaking deeper into the woods. There is much to impart, and little time to spare. The blight tightens its grip with each passing day, and the gateway, its defenses, are weakening. Alara hesitated for a heartbeat, casting a glance back toward the edge of the Whisperwood, toward the village that had banished her. Then, turning, she followed Kael into the encroaching darkness, her silvery gaze shimmering with newfound resolve. The path ahead promised peril, she knew, but for the first time in her life, Alara felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, no longer merely an outcast. A scion of the Guardians, and the destiny of the Whisperwood, perhaps the world, now rested in her hands. As they moved forward, Kael began to spin a yarn of primeval magic and obscured lore. He recounted the origins of the first protectors, individuals who had nurtured a union with the Whisperwood, mastering its potency to fight against the encroaching dark. He carefully detailed their unique skills, the ability to revitalize the land, communicate with the forest's diverse fauna, harness control over the elements, and see through the veil into the realms surrounding them. He explained the rituals they had undertaken, the consecrated groves where they would meet, and the age-old artifacts they manipulated to focus their power. He told of their reverence for the moon and the stars, their understanding of the delicate dance between light and shadow, and then he revealed how they fell, the rising of fear and superstition, the persecution of all who possessed magical prowess, and the slow dwindling of their power and knowledge. He told of the Great Purge, when the protectors had been hunted to near extinction, their mysteries lost to the passing of time. Alara listened intently, her mind soaking up every word, every detail, as if she was remembering something she had long forgotten. Further into the wood they strode. The trees grew taller, their upper branches forming a dense canopy over their heads, smothering the rays of the sun. The temperature cooled, and the ambience of the wood strengthened. The rustling of the falling leaves, the hooting of owls, and the far howl of the wild wolves. Alara felt a rising sensation of unease, an itching feel on the back of her neck. She could sense the presence of other beings lurking within the deep shadows, their eyes watching her with curiosity. But she also felt a strange sense of protection, as if the forest herself was shielding them from harm.
"Where are we going?"
she whispered, barely able to squeak the words from her dry throat. "To a place of power," Kale answered, his voice ringing with a deep, time-worn energy. "A place where the veil is thin, where you can begin to call upon your own abilities." Kale halted ahead of a clearing, bathed in moonlight. In the center stood an ancient oak tree, its knobby branches reaching for the sky like pleading arms. At its base, the ground was covered in moss and colorful flowers, and a gentle stream flowed nearby, its water shimmering like refined silver. "This is it," Kale whispered, his voice full of devotion. "The heart of the Whisperwood." Shadow Blight. The heart of the Whisperwood throbbed, its soft luminescence painting the glade in an otherworldly sheen. Alara grounded herself, feeling the vibrant pulse of the land, an awe-inspiring energy that thrilled and daunted her in equal measure. Before her stood Kale, his gaze unwavering, the breeze murmuring through his pelt like hushed confidences. "The Shadow Blight," he began, his tone heavy with foreboding, "is more than a mere affliction of the soil. It's a spiritual putrescence, a gloom spawned from terror and hopelessness. It thrives on the absence of light, contorting the once vibrant into something ghastly and vile." He indicated the forest fringe, where trees stood contorted and barren, their foliage a ghastly pallor. It began insidiously, a creeping enervation. Creatures turned savage. Flora refused to yield. Subsequently, the shadows deepened, and the susurrus commenced, insidious whispers that played upon apprehension and mistrust, pitting neighbor against neighbor. Alara shuddered, the memory of judgmental gazes, the spiteful slanders that had banished her from her hamlet resurfacing. The whispers? They were genuine? Regrettably so, Kale affirmed. The blight magnifies the latent darkness within hearts, fanning the embers of bias, transforming suspicion into animosity, and animosity into brutality. It devoured your village long before it festered upon the terrain. He advanced, his silvery irises reflecting the heartwood's glow. The land languishes, Alara. The blight spreads like a suffocating vine, draining the vitality from all it touches. The waterways are tainted, the woodlands wither, and their denizens are warped into monstrous travesties of their former selves. "We've already forfeited so much, and soon—" His voice trailed off, the unspoken conclusion hanging ominously. "Soon, there will be nothing salvageable." Alara finished, her voice a mere exhalation. The weight of his disclosure bore down on her, a stifling cloak of despair. Kale nodded gravely. "Yet, hope endures, hope persists, even with the feeblest ember." He redirected his gaze towards the heartwood, his expression softening. For cycles, the Guardians have maintained vigilance, preserving the delicate equilibrium between light and shadow. "We knew the blight would inevitably return, as darkness invariably endeavors to reclaim what it has relinquished." "Guardians?" Alara inquired, bewildered. "But you said they had vanished." "Lost, scattered, but not wholly extinguished," Kale amended. "Their lineage persists, often unknowingly, and occasionally a spark flares, a testament to the ancient power awakening once more." He turned to face her squarely, his eyes blazing with an intensity that quickened her pulse. A prophecy was envisioned, passed down through Guardian lineages. A prophecy of a silver-eyed champion, destined to arise when the shadow blight threatened to engulf the land. Alara gaped, her mind spinning. Silver-eyed champion? Destiny? It resembled a fantastical narrative, plucked from the pages of forgotten lore. Not her reality, not the existence of a girl branded a sorceress and exiled into the wilds. The silver eyes, Kyle continued, his voice resonating with the Heartwood's potency, are not a malediction, Alara. They are a boon, a key to unlocking the primeval power dormant within you. The power to rejuvenate the land, to expunge the corruption, to confront the darkness, and reinstate balance. He extended a paw, gently touching her forearm. You descend from the Guardians, Alara. Their protective essence flows within you, and you with your argent eyes are the one we have anticipated. The revelation struck her like a physical blow. She recoiled, her breath seizing in her throat. No, she gasped, shaking her head. No, this cannot be factual. I am not a champion. I'm simply Alara, the girl they denounced as a witch. That is the perception they instilled within you, Kale responded gently. But it does not define you. Strength resides within you, Alara, strength yet to be unveiled. The Guardians were not combatants or sorcerers, not in the conventional sense. They served as conduits, channels for the land's own vigor. They comprehended the interconnectedness of all things, the fragile harmony that sustains existence. And they willingly sacrificed everything to safeguard it. He approached, his gaze probing hers. You have witnessed the darkness, Alara. You have felt its sting. You understand its capabilities. Can you passively observe as it devours everything you cherish? Her mind raced, endeavoring to reconcile the image of herself as a potent protector with the actuality of her life, the dread and isolation that had long characterized her existence. She recalled her grandmother's kindness, the tales she had recounted of bygone customs, the echoes of enchantment that had lingered in the atmosphere around her. Could it be plausible? Could there be validity in the ancient sagas? I don't know, she stammered, her voice faltering. I don't know if I am capable of this. I am not formidable enough. Your fortitude exceeds your perception, Kale assured her. The power already resides within you, awaiting its awakening, and you are not isolated. I am here to mentor you, to assist you in unlocking your potential. The wolves will stand by you, as they have invariably stood by the Guardians. And others exist, dispersed throughout the land, who still recall the old ways. We will locate them, together. He paused, his eyes alight with a blend of optimism and resolve. But the determination rests with you, Alara. You must ascertain whether you are willing to embrace your destiny, to accept the responsibility bestowed upon your shoulders. The fate of the Whisperwood, perhaps even the fate of the world, hinges on your decision. The gravity of his words was almost intolerable. She surveyed the glade, the throbbing light of the Heartwood, the gnarled and decaying trees on the periphery, the steadfast form of Kale before her. The immensity of the undertaking threatened to overwhelm her, to crush her beneath its impossible burden. What must I do? She inquired, her voice scarcely audible. Kale smiled, a flicker of warmth illuminating his silver eyes. Firstly, you must cultivate self-trust, to have faith in the power that dwells within you. Subsequently, you must learn to govern it, to channel it, to employ it for healing and defense. And lastly, you must confront the darkness, to confront the shadow blight and all its horrors, and to expunge it from this land indefinitely. He stepped back, gesturing towards the Heartwood. The initial step is to connect with the source, to perceive the land's energy coursing through you. Close your eyes, Alara, and heed. Heed the rustling of the wind, the sighing of the earth, the heartbeat of the Whisperwood. Allow it to guide you, allow it to illuminate your path. Alara hesitated momentarily, then sealed her eyes shut. The forest sounds intensified, swirling about her, engulfing her senses. She could discern the cool earth beneath her bare feet, the gentle caress of the breeze upon her skin, the Heartwood's warmth radiating outwards. She directed her attention inward, endeavoring to subdue the tumult in her mind, to quell the qualms and anxieties that threatened to consume her. She envisioned roots sprouting from her feet, anchoring her to the earth, drawing strength from the primeval soil. She envisioned branches extending from her arms, reaching towards the heavens, absorbing the energy of the sun and the moon. Gradually, tentatively, she commenced to perceive it, a faint prickling sensation, a subtle resonance that vibrated deep within her core. It intensified, growing stronger with each inhalation, until it resembled a current of electricity surging through her veins. She gasped, her eyes snapping open. The glade shimmered before her, The colors more vivid, the sounds more distinct, the energy palpable. She could sense the Whisperwood's life force flowing through her, connecting her to all that surrounded her. And then, she espied it. A swirling vortex of darkness, lurking just beyond the clearing's boundary, its tendrils reaching out like grasping talons, the shadow blight. It was nearer than she had anticipated, more potent, more terrifying, and it observed her, waiting. Fear seized her heart, threatening to paralyze her. But then, she recalled Kayel's words, the prophecy, the responsibility that had been placed upon her. She pondered her grandmother, the tales she had related, the enchantment that had perpetually lingered in the atmosphere around her. She inhaled deeply, fortifying herself against the fear. She closed her eyes once more, fixating on the energy that coursed through her, the power that lay dormant within her. She reached outward with her mind, reaching towards the darkness, and whispered a silent supplication. "Reveal yourself," she implored. "Reveal what I must accomplish." And then, the world detonated. Training begins. Sunlight filtered through the emerald ceiling, painting the mossy ground where Kayel waited, his patience a tangible presence. Alara shifted, the burden of her appointed path weighing on her spirit. A subtle energy thrummed in the air, a vibrant chord emanating from the heart of the Whisperwood. "Today," Kayel's voice resonated, a deep timbre that vibrated within her. "We begin to decipher the forest's true voice. Beyond the rustle of leaves or birdsong lies the profound language of earth, water, air, and light." With a sweeping gesture he indicated the surrounding panorama, ancient trees alongside delicate ferns. These elements comprise the very soul of the Whisperwood, and they are becoming one with you. Alara's mouth felt parched. "One with me? I don't understand." A gentle smile touched Kayel's lips. "You will. Feel the ground beneath you, Alara. Not just the moss's texture, but the land's very pulse, the binding roots, the sustaining minerals, the silent, enduring strength." She closed her eyes, focusing as instructed. Her thoughts scattered, replaying the villagers' taunts, the burn of their scorn. Then, a flicker, a faint tremor, a heartbeat rising from the soil through her legs. Subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably there. "Good," Kayel encouraged. "Now, reach for the water, the lifeblood coursing through the forest's veins. The dewdrop poised on a leaf, the swift current of the stream, the fog clinging to time-worn stones." Extending a hand toward a nearby stream, its surface gleamed beneath the fractured sunlight. She strove to focus, to sense the coolness, the fluidity, the vitality it held. Doubts returned, whispers of past failures. She pressed on, concentrating on the image of the water, the melody of its flow. Suddenly, the stream seemed to shimmer, its surface disturbed despite the stillness of the air. A slender thread of water lifted from the stream, hovering before her. Frail, ephemeral, yet tangible proof of nascent ability. A surge of excitement, a thrill dormant for years, coursed through her, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a chilling wave of fear. The water thread faltered, collapsing back into the stream. "It's all right," Kayel comforted, his hand a light touch on her shoulder. "Mastery requires time. Let setbacks become your instructors." He then guided her toward the air, the unseen currents dancing through the trees. "Feel the caress of the breeze, Alara, the very breath of the forest, the wind's boundless freedom." This proved even more elusive. The air resisted her grasp, defied definition. She felt it, but couldn't shape it, as she had momentarily managed with the water. Frustration constricted her chest, stealing her breath. "Focus," Kayel's voice, firm yet gentle, instructed. "Empty your mind. Let the air flow through you, not against you." She tried, but the doubts persisted. An outcast, a failure. How could she ever be a guardian, a protector? Control forces she couldn't even comprehend. As her frustration peaked, the earth beneath her feet lurched. Not the gentle tremor of before, but a violent convulsion that rattled the trees and scattered pebbles. Alara gasped, her eyes wide with alarm. Unintentional. A storm brewing within, a tempest of untamed power threatening to explode. Kayel placed both hands on her shoulders, his gaze a beacon of calm. "Alara, breathe. You are not a weapon, but a vessel, a conduit for the Whisperwood's power. Don't resist it, guide it." His words, a lifeline in the swirling chaos, resonated within her. Closing her eyes, she focused on his voice, the steady rhythm of his breath. Slowly, the tremors subsided, the earth stilled, Opening her eyes, she saw concern etched on Kael's face. But beneath it, something else. A spark of hope, a glint of belief. That, he said softly, was a glimpse of your potential, the dormant power within you, raw, untamed but undeniably present. With time, with practice, you will learn to master it. He led her to a small clearing, where a circle of stones nestled amid the trees. A place of focus, of connection. Here, you will learn to harness the elements, to weave them together, to wield them for the Whisperwood's protection. He pointed to a nearby tree, its branches reaching like supplicating arms. Begin with that tree. Reach out to it, sense its strength, its resilience, its rootedness. Try to commune with it. Alara stared, feeling foolish. Communicate with a tree? Absurd. Yet, she trusted Kael. She had to. Approaching the tree cautiously, she placed her hand on its rough bark. Closing her eyes, she tried to quiet her mind, to open herself to any latent energy. At first, nothing. Only the bark's texture, the wind's sigh in the leaves. Then, a faint sensation, a subtle vibration, rippled through her hand and up her arm. A low hum, the tree's song. She focused, allowing it to permeate her, to connect her to its essence. Its age, its wisdom, its deep connection to the earth, its joy in the sunlight, its sorrow in the storms. And then, something else. A faint thread of darkness clinging to its roots. A creeping shadow, a blight. Fear constricted her, icy and sharp. The shadow blight, real, present. Recoiling, she snapped open her eyes. Something wrong, she stammered, pointing to the tree's base. A darkness, clinging to the roots. Kael's expression hardened as he knelt, scrutinizing the tree. You are right, he confirmed grimly. The blight is closer than we anticipated. Rising, his gaze locked with hers. This changes everything, Alara. We must accelerate your training. The Whisperwood is imperiled, and you are its sole hope. Alara gazed at the tree, the faint shadow lurking at its base. The weight of destiny pressed down, heavier than before. Fear threatened to paralyze her. But then, she recalled the tree's resilient strength, and Kael's words, "You are not a weapon, but a vessel." Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders. Unsure if she was ready or strong enough, but knowing she couldn't run, couldn't hide. The Whisperwood needed her, and she wouldn't fail it. What do I do? She asked, her voice trembling slightly but firm. How do I fight it? Kael placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with quiet resolve. You will learn, Alara. You will learn to wield your powers, to command the elements, to dispel the darkness. Together, we will save the Whisperwood. The training intensified. Days blurred into weeks as Kael pushed Alara to her limits, challenging her to master the elements, to conquer her fear, to embrace her path. She stumbled, she faltered, she doubted. Yet, she persevered. She learned to summon wind gusts, to erect earthen walls, to conjure sparks of light. She learned to heal wounded plants, to calm troubled spirits, to sense the forest's energetic flow. Slowly, gradually, she began to believe. In herself, in her abilities, in her potential to save the Whisperwood. But the shadow blight spread, its tendrils sinking deeper, corrupting all they touched. The stakes escalated, and Alara knew that time dwindled. She had to be ready. Strong enough, the prejudice endured, the isolation suffered, had all been preparation. Now, she had a place to belong and a purpose to embrace. One evening, as sunset cast long shadows across the clearing, Kael approached, his expression somber. Tomorrow, he announced, we confront the blight. First, attack. The dawn bled across the sky in shades of violet and jaundiced yellow, mirroring the disquiet that gnawed at Alara. Kael, unusually somber, had traded his customary levity for a grim focus, meticulously honing the edge of his obsidian sword. A mere nod was her greeting as she joined him, already armored in practical leather, at the glade's edge. The air was thick, saturated with an oversweet aroma that wrinkled her nose, the scent of corruption masked as pleasantry. Ready? Kael's voice was a flat monotone. Alara swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Ready? Hardly. Petrified? Utterly. But she straightened, summoning a facade of courage. As ready as I'll get. They moved with haste into the woods, Kael leading with an almost preternatural swiftness. The Whisperwood, typically alive with rustling foliage and unseen creatures' songs, was unnervingly hushed. Even the breeze seemed to linger. Alara felt an itching on her skin, the sensation of unseen eyes watching, stalking. She clutched the simple wooden staff Kale had crafted, its smooth surface a tangible anchor in her rising dread. They arrived at a narrow gorge, a rent in the earth choked with tangled roots and grasping vines. Kale halted abruptly, his hand raised. No further on foot, the blight's influence peaks here. His silver eyes, narrowed in concentration, swept the ravine. Brace yourself for anything. Alara's pulse hammered in her chest. Anything. The word was a vast, terrifying horizon. She tried to recall Kale's breathing exercises, but her mind was a chaotic scramble of fear and uncertainty. Failure loomed, her powers untamed. Could she be the downfall of the Whisperwood? A guttural growl shattered the stillness. From the ravine's depths, shadows writhed and cohered, solidifying into monstrous shapes. Vaguely human, they were warped and defiled, their gray flesh stretched taut over bone, their eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Bony spurs protruded from their spines, and wickedly sharp claws tipped their hands. Heat radiated from them, enough to wither the surrounding greenery to brittle husks. Leading the pack was a hulking brute, his muscles bulging, his face frozen in a permanent sneer. A crude, jagged sword, slick with viscous black fluid, filled his massive fist. His aura pulsed with raw power, a wave of palpable malevolence that washed over Alara, shrinking her inside. Grimfang! Kyle spat, his tone steeped in loathing. I should have anticipated this. Grimfang barked a laugh, a sound like granite grinding on granite. Kale, king of the Whisperwood, playing in the Blight's domain? You should have remained hidden within your precious forest. His gaze, icy and cruel, flickered to Alara. And who is this? Another woodland trinket. She carries a unique fragrance. He sniffed theatrically. Intriguing. Without warning, Grimfang roared a command, and the creatures surged forward with surprising speed and coordination. KL reacted instantly, drawing his obsidian blade. It pulsed with an inner light, a brilliant defiance against the encroaching darkness. He met the first attacker head-on, a blur of deadly grace. The obsidian sang as it cleaved through air, bone, and sinew. But for each creature KL vanquished, two more filled its place. Alara remained frozen, mind reeling. This was no drill, no theoretical exercise. This was survival. Fear had crippled her. She watched in horror as Kale, despite his prowess, was slowly swallowed by the sheer number of assailants. One broke free from the throng, lunging for her, claws extended, fetid breath washing over her face. Alara flinched, squeezed her eyes shut, braced for impact. But it never came. Instead, a surge of raw, untamed energy erupted from within. Not a practiced spell, nor a learned technique, but pure, desperate instinct. She opened her eyes. Silver light blazed from her, slamming into the creature with tremendous force. It shrieked, flesh blistering, and hurled backwards into the ravine wall with a sickening crunch. The others recoiled, stunned by the sudden eruption. Alara gasped, body trembling, vision blurring. Exhaustion threatened to drown her, but this surge bought them precious time. KL exploited the opening, his blade a shining whirlwind, dispatching several more with ruthless efficiency. Grimfang watched, eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his brutal features. So, the little witch bears her fangs, he snarled. Irrelevant, she won't last. He gestured to his minions. Kill them both! The creatures renewed their attack with heightened ferocity. Alara knew a repeat performance was impossible. She was spent. She needed another way. Clutching her staff, she sought strength in its familiar feel. Kale's words echoed in her mind. Feel the Whisperwood. Let it guide you. Closing her eyes, she focused on the forest, seeking the thrum of life in the trees, the quiet hum in the earth, the breeze whispering in the leaves. She reached out, tentatively seeking connection, a fragile tendril of power flowing from her to the Whisperwood and back. Faint, barely there, but real. Focusing on the attackers, Alara extended her hand, channeling the forest's energy. A vine, thick as a serpent, erupted from the ground, ensnaring a creature's legs, tripping it. Another vine lashed out, smacking another across the face, sending it tumbling. Clumsy, uncontrolled, but effective. Kale, recognizing the shift, adapted his tactics, exploiting her distractions. He moved with renewed intensity, his blade a dance of death. Grimfang roared in frustration, face twisted with rage. He charged Alara, sword raised high. "I'll crush you myself, little witch." Kale intercepted him, swords clashing in a shower of sparks, the force reverberating through the earth. They were matched, their fight a brutal ballet of strength and savagery. Alara knew she couldn't remain a spectator. She needed to aid Kale. She focused, summoning more vines, directing them at Grimfang. They lashed, striving to hinder him, but he batted them aside with contemptuous ease. Suddenly, a jolt of searing pain ripped through her head. Images flashed, twisted trees, corrupted soil, shadows stirring in the gloom. Visions of the blight, its insidious creep, its ultimate ambition. And then understanding crashed upon her. This wasn't random. They hunted her. The blight knew her, knew what she was. And it craved her demise. The revelation struck like a physical blow, stealing her breath, reeling her. She stumbled, losing focus. The vines withered and died. Grimfang seized his opportunity. He shoved Kyle back with a brutal blow, then turned his full attention to Alara, eyes burning with triumphant malice. "Now, witch, your end arrives." He raised his blade for the killing stroke. Kale roared, lunging to protect her, but he was too late. As Grimfang's sword descended, a blinding flash of silver erupted from Alara, brighter, stronger than before. It engulfed Grimfang, searing him, burning away the shadows clinging to him. He screamed, dropping his sword, clutching his face. The light expanded, pushing back the remaining creatures, forcing them into the ravine's shadows. The air crackled, the stench of decay replaced by ozone and wildflowers. Then, as swiftly as it had appeared, the light vanished, leaving Alara slumped against a tree, weak and trembling. Kale rushed to her, his face etched with worry. Grimfang, face a charred mess, scrambled to his feet, eyes filled with hatred. "This is far from over, King of the Whisperwood," he snarled. "The blight will devour you all, and the little witch shall face a fate beyond death." He vanished into the shadows, his remaining forces melting with him. Kale knelt beside Alara, gently touching her face. "Alara, are you all right?" She nodded faintly, body still shaking. I think so." Kale helped her up, his expression grim. "They sought you, Alara. The blight is aware of you. It knows your powers." Alara stared, eyes wide with alarm. "What does that imply?" "It implies," Kale said, voice low and grave, "that time is running out." The ancient temple. Kale's arm offered a steadying anchor as they stumbled away from the carnage. Each footfall was a fresh wave of torment for aching muscles, yet the memory of Grimfang's grotesque visage and the creeping paralysis of blight-tinged power spurred Alara onward. The Whisperwood, usually a sun-dappled sanctuary humming with life, now choked her with a sense of claustrophobia. Trees loomed like disapproving sentinels, their shadows stretching into grasping claws. "You holding up?" Kale's voice, a low vibration against her temple, resonated with concern. She managed a nod, each breath a ragged gasp. "Just need respite soon." He didn't press, his quiet acquiescence speaking volumes of his own depleted reserves. He had borne the brunt of Grimfang's fury, a buffer while she grappled with the bewildering energy blossoming within her. The sight of the blight, a festering corruption clinging to his fur, etched itself into her memory, the way it shriveled and retreated from her touch. The blight, it recoiled from her. They pressed on, Kale charting a course through the dense undergrowth, skirting pools of tainted earth where the shadow blight had taken insidious root. The very air felt viscous, thick with the coppery tang of spilled blood, and the sickly sweet perfume of rot. A misstep, a gnarled root, and a jolt of pain shot through her ankle. Kale's grip tightened, averting a full fall. "Easy," he murmured, his breath warm on her ear. "Almost there. Where are we going?" She rasped, her throat raw. "Sanctuary," he answered, his gaze unwavering, beyond the blight's easy reach. Finally, an eon later, Kale halted before a seemingly impenetrable curtain of ivy. Indistinguishable from the surrounding foliage, it concealed a secret. His fingers danced across the verdant surface, tracing an unseen pattern. A subtle click, barely audible, and a section of the ivy rippled, unveiling a narrow aperture that swallowed the light. "This way," he urged, drawing the verdant screen aside. Hesitation pricked at Alara. The air emanating from the opening was cool, heavy with the aroma of moss and something far older, a resonance that vibrated within her very core, a siren's call both alluring and terrifying. Sensing her trepidation, Kael reassured, "Safe, Ilara, I promise, the ancient temple." He vanished into the darkness, and she followed, parting the heavy ivy. The moment she crossed the threshold, the world underwent a transformation. The suffocating oppression of the blight dissipated, replaced by an atmosphere of hushed reverence. A palpable chill permeated the air, and a diffused, spectral light filtered through fissures in the decaying stonework. It was a cavernous expanse, carved from the living rock of the earth itself. Intricate carvings adorned the walls, strange bestiary and symbols that thrummed with dormant power. The scent of damp earth and time, worn stone hung heavy, a testament to epochs past. At the heart of the chamber stood a monolithic stone altar, coated in a fine layer of undisturbed dust. A solitary beam of moonlight speared down from a hole in the ceiling, bathing the altar in an unearthly luminescence, as if alive, casting wavering shadows that danced like phantoms. Ilara drew a sharp breath, her lungs seizing. The place felt consecrated, a pristine haven amidst a world succumbing to corruption. Kael observed her, his face a canvas of relief and lingering worry. This ground, it's shielded, ancient magic, potent magic. The blight struggles to touch it here. He guided her deeper, past crumbling pillars draped with gossamer cobwebs, through archways whispering secrets of forgotten ages. The silence was absolute, punctuated only by the metronomic cadence of water droplets echoing in the vastness. "What is this place?" Ilara breathed, her voice a mere tremor. "Built ages ago," Kael explained, "by those who preceded us, guardians of the Whisperwood, like you." Ilara stopped short, her argent eyes widening in disbelief. "Like me?" Kael confirmed with a nod. "Their sanctuary, a nexus of power, a refuge. They honed their abilities here, communed with the very soul of the forest." He indicated the carvings. They foresaw the shadow blight's coming, the cataclysm it would unleash. They left behind their wisdom, their guidance, for those who would inherit their mantle. He led her into a small antechamber, opening off the main cavern. Within, upon a stone table, lay a collection of artifacts, time-worn scrolls bound in cracked leather, tarnished silver amulets, and crystalline orbs that pulsed with contained light. "The relics of the previous guardians," Kael revealed. "Perhaps they hold the key to understanding your own gifts, to mastering them." Ilara reached out, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface of a crystalline orb. A jolt of pure energy surged through her, an overwhelming flood of raw power that stole her breath. Images cascaded through her mind, visions of the Whisperwood in its vibrant heyday, of creatures both wondrous and fearsome, of clashes waged and victories won against the encroaching shadows. She recoiled, snatching her hand back. The visions dissipated, leaving her reeling and disoriented. "What was that?" she gasped, her voice fragile. "The orb," Kael replied, his eyes reflecting awe and anticipation. "Showing you echoes of the past, the Guardian's lineage, connecting you to your inheritance." He lifted one of the scrolls, its leather cover flaking with age. "Their collective knowledge, their accumulated wisdom, resides within these pages. They may hold the answers to vanquishing the Shadow Blight." Ilara's gaze swept over the artifacts, the scrolls, then back to Kael, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion. She was but a simple villager, an outcast, branded a witch and driven from her home. How could she possibly be a guardian, a protector of the Whisperwood? I don't understand," she stammered, overwhelmed. "I am nothing like them. I possess no special skills." "You do," Kael insisted, his voice resolute. "You have felt it, have you not? The power slumbering within you, your connection to the forest's essence. Grimfang sensed it too. That is why he hunted you." He closed the distance between them, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are Shadowborn Guardian, Ilara. It courses through your veins, resides within your very soul. It simply requires awakening." He took her hand, his touch sending a warm tremor through her. "This temple, it will serve as a crucible, a guide. You are not alone, Ilara. I am here, and so are the spirits of the guardians who came before." Ilara's eyes roamed the chamber, taking in the ancient artifacts, the walls adorned with carvings that whispered forgotten secrets in the dim light. A flicker of hope ignited within her, a spark of belief in something larger than herself. Perhaps she was not as helpless as she believed. Perhaps she could learn to harness the power within. to embrace her destined role as a guardian. But apprehension lingered, a knot of ice in her stomach. The shadow blight gained strength with each passing day, its tendrils reaching deeper into the heart of the Whisperwood. Grimfang was merely a harbinger. What if she proved inadequate? What if she faltered, and darkness consumed all? Kael seemed to perceive her fear. He squeezed her hand in reassurance. "We will confront it together, Alara. We will learn together. Your strength surpasses your understanding." Releasing her hand, he stepped back, his gaze filled with unwavering conviction. "Rest now. You must replenish your energy. Tomorrow, your training will commence." Alara nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs. Training. The word carried such weighty implications, yet she knew Kael spoke truth. She could no longer evade her calling. She must confront her fears, embrace her power, and become the guardian she was fated to be. Finding a small niche in the chamber's corner, she sank down, leaning against the cool embrace of the stone wall. Exhaustion enveloped her, dragging her down into dreamless oblivion. As she slept, the temple seemed to hum around her, its ancient energies weaving into her subconscious, preparing her for the trials that lay ahead. The spirits of the guardians kept vigil, their silent presence a pledge of guidance and protection. The Whisperwood itself held its breath, awaiting the rise of its prophesied champion. The prophecy, the ancient temple resonated with potent energy, a silent anthem of bygone power. Beams slanted through fractured stone far above, illuminating swirling dust and indecipherable, time-worn frescoes. The mingled sense of aged vellum and cool, damp rock assaulted her senses, a sharp contrast to the lingering reek of smoke and decay that permeated her garments. A dull throb pulsed in her side with each breath, a persistent reminder of Grimfang's vicious attack. Despite his own injuries, Kael radiated an unwavering resolve that anchored her. He explored the chilled stone, his fingers tracing the weathered carvings. "This place remembers," he murmured, more to himself than aloud. "It remembers the guardians. It remembers the encroachment of the blight." He guided her deeper, past crumbling effigies of solemn warriors and through archways embellished with florid designs. At last, they arrived in a grand chamber dominated by a colossal pedestal. Atop it rested a collection of scrolls, their brittle leather bindings secured with tarnished silver. "The prophecy," Kael breathed, his voice hushed with reverence. "It's all here." Alara approached the pedestal warily, her argent eyes widening with a blend of trepidation and wonder. She extended a hesitant hand, her fingertips ghosting across the cool, coarse surface of a scroll. "Easy," Kael cautioned softly. "These are ancient. Their energies are unstable." Together, they gingerly lifted one of the scrolls and bore it to a nearby table, its surface polished smooth by centuries of use. From his pouch, Kael produced a vial of shimmering liquid, carefully dispensing a few drops to bathe the chamber in a soft, ethereal luminescence. The script adorning the scroll was unlike anything Alara had ever encountered, a fluid, elegant language comprised of intricate symbols and obscure sigils. "Can you decipher it?" she whispered. Kael nodded, his brow creased in concentration. "An archaic dialect of Sylvan. I dedicated years to it, hoping to unravel these prophecies." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the scroll. "Let's unlock its secrets." He began to read, his voice echoing in the stillness. The words were foreign, yet Alara felt a profound resonance, as if her very core understood them. "When shadows deepen and darkness holds sway, when the Whisperwood cries and the blight holds its sway, then shall rise the silver-eyed one, a guardian of old, to shatter the chains and reclaim what's been traded." Kael translated, his tone grave. Alara shivered despite the chamber's stagnant air. The words mirrored the inner turmoil raging within her. She, the ostracized villager, the outcast with silver eyes, was being summoned to rescue the Whisperwood. Kael continued, his voice gaining strength as he delved further into the text. The scroll detailed the Shadowborn Guardians, their affinity for the Whisperwood, and their capacity to command its primeval power. It depicted the blight as a creeping corruption, a manifestation of fear and despair threatening to engulf all life. To vanquish the shadow and resurrect the light, one must seek 3 artifacts hidden from sight, Kael recited, his eyes scanning the parchment. The Sunstone of Eldoria, the Moonpetal Chalice, and the Heartwood of the Whisperwood itself. Alara leaned closer, her pulse quickening. "Artifacts, what are they precisely?" Kael explained, detailing how the Sunstone of Eldoria was fabled to contain the sun's very energy, capable of cauterizing the blight's corruption. The moon petal chalice, imbued with lunar essence, could soothe the whisperwood's anguish and restore its equilibrium. And the whisperwood heartwood, a fragment of the ancient tree from which the forest arose, pulsed with its vital essence. The scroll delineates their locations, Kale noted, indicating symbols inscribed within the text. The sunstone dwells within the sunken city, deep beneath the azure sea. The moon petal chalice lies sequestered within the crystal caves, watched over by ancestral spirits. And the heartwood, it lies within the blighted lands themselves, under the guard of the shadow beasts. Alara's breath hitched. Each location sounded more treacherous than the last. The sunken city, the crystal caves, the blighted lands, places of myth, spoken of only in fearful whispers around village fires. These will be dangerous endeavors, Kale said, meeting her gaze, but we must find them if we hope to halt the spread of the blight. He unrolled another scroll, its parchment even more fragile and time-worn. This one contained meticulously drawn maps and diagrams, depicting perilous routes and concealed pathways leading to the artifacts. As Kale examined the maps, determination bloomed within Alara, eclipsing her fear. No longer just Alara, the outcast. She was Alara, the Shadowborn guardian, the Whisperwood's prophesied protector. She joined Kale, studying the lines and symbols. She questioned, seeking to understand the challenges ahead. Kale patiently answered, sharing his knowledge of the Whisperwood. Hours dissolved as they pored over the scrolls, deciphering clues and memorizing roots. The soft luminosity cast elongated shadows that danced across the chamber walls. At long last, with the first rays of dawn infiltrating the temple, they had formulated a plan. They knew where to go, what to seek, and what perils to anticipate. Alara arose, her body weary but her spirit ablaze. She gazed at Kale, her silver eyes reflecting nascent resolve. A long journey lies ahead, she declared, her voice steady. But we will not fail, Kale smiled, his eyes mirroring pride. I know you won't, Alara. You are the guardian the Whisperwood awaits. He rested a hand on her shoulder, infusing her with strength. Rest now, we depart at dawn. Alara nodded, accepting his support. She settled onto a bed of woven moss Kale had prepared, her body sinking into its yielding embrace. Exhaustion washed over her, yet a sense of peace she hadn't known in years settled upon her. She was no longer isolated, no longer an outcast. She had purpose, a destiny, and she had Kyle, her guide, her protector, her friend. The weight of the prophecy remained, but as sleep claimed her, she dreamt not of fear, but of sunlight dappling the Whisperwood's leaves, of children's laughter echoing through its glades, and of a future where the blight was a distant echo. She dreamt of acceptance, of belonging, of a world where silver eyes symbolized hope, not curse. The sunstone, dawn painted the sky in hues of violet and rose as their journey commenced. Kale, leaning on a Whisperwood branch fashioned into a staff, moved with less of his characteristic ease, a persistent throb in his leg hindering him. Beside him, Alara's argent gaze swept the trail, her expression a blend of trepidation and resolve that set her jaw. The ancient scrolls spoke of Anya, an entity as old as the forest itself, guarding the sunstone. Are you certain this is wise, Kale? Alara murmured, her voice barely audible above the soughing leaves. Pushing yourself so. The blight. Kale halted, his hand briefly covering hers. The blight can wait. Your well-being cannot, nor can the sunstone. We must secure it before the encroaching shadows discover its hiding place. He offered a reassuring smile, though Alara detected the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. Besides, he quipped, a playful wink appearing, a little adversity builds character. The path snaked deeper into the Whisperwood's embrace, the trees growing taller and more twisted with each stride. Sunlight dripped through the dense leaf cover, scattering fractured light across the forest floor. Alara noted the increasing warmth of the air, the heightened aroma of pine and rich earth filling her senses. They skirted ancient, rune-carved stones and streams that burbled with an unseen, vibrant energy. After what seemed an age, Kale halted before a glade saturated in an almost ethereal golden light. At its heart stood a colossal tree, its girth exceeding anything she had ever witnessed. Its bark was a tapestry of wrinkles, resembling the wizened visage of a sage, its branches reaching skyward like pleading arms. This was no ordinary tree. An aura of primordial power radiated from it, tangible and awe-inspiring. Anya, Kale called out, his voice imbued with respect that echoed in the tranquil air. "We seek the sunstone." Silence descended, broken only by the trill of hidden birds. Then, a voice, as gentle as wind whispering through leaves, permeated the clearing, seeming to originate from nowhere and everywhere. Alara felt a tremor course through her, a deep instinct alerting her to the immense power residing within the ancient arboreal guardian. Slowly, a face began to materialize in the bark, features emerging from the swirling grain of the wood. Eyes, profound and knowing, opened, their gaze both penetrating and unexpectedly gentle. "Kyle," Anya intoned, her voice tinged with a wistful wisdom. "It has been many cycles since a king of the Whisperwood graced me with his presence. And you, Alara Shadowborn, the forest sings of your coming and of the encroaching gloom that trails your steps." Alara stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We seek the Sunstone, Anya. We know of the blight and the peril it presents to the Whisperwood." Anya's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "Knowledge alone is insufficient, child. The Sunstone is not a mere weapon to be wielded casually. It demands a pristine heart, unwavering courage, and a profound understanding of nature's equilibrium. Are you truly prepared to shoulder such a responsibility?" "I don't know," Alara confessed, her voice vulnerable and sincere. "But I am ready to learn. I am willing to do all that is needed to safeguard the Whisperwood." Anya remained silent for what felt like an eternity, her gaze dissecting Alara's very soul. Then, she spoke, her voice softer, almost a sigh. "Very well. I shall test you. I shall reveal your deepest terrors, your most profound uncertainties. If you can confront them, if you can overcome them, then you will prove your worthiness of the Sunstone." Before Alara could respond, the glade began to undulate and distort. The golden light intensified, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive, alien energy. Haunting visions flickered around her, fragments of her past, present, and perhaps her future. She saw the faces of villagers, twisted in expressions of loathing and dread, their voices reverberating in her mind, branding her a pariah, a monstrosity. She felt the familiar ache of solitude, the crushing burden of isolation. Then, the visions morphed. She witnessed Kale, emaciated and wan, consumed by the blight, his eyes reflecting utter despair. He reached toward her, his voice a ragged whisper. "Alara, save the forest." Dread seized her. She saw herself, standing alone against the relentless darkness, the Whisperwood decaying around her, the blight devouring everything she cherished. She was impotent, helpless, doomed to failure. "No!" Alara cried out, her voice fracturing with raw emotion. She stumbled backward, striving to flee the horrifying visions, but they pursued her relentlessly, closing in, suffocating her. She saw her mother's face, indistinct and blurred, yet brimming with profound sorrow. A voice whispered, not Anya's, but one resonating from the depths of her being, "You are not strong enough. You will fail as I did." Doubt gnawed at her, spewing insidious deceits, eroding her confidence, her hope. Was she truly destined for failure? Was she merely a callow youth burdened with an insurmountable task? Kale's voice, though faint, sliced through the miasma of darkness. "Alara, look at me!" She struggled to focus, to wrench her gaze from the terrifying specters. Kale stood before her, his eyes radiating unwavering faith, his hand outstretched. He was bruised and weary, the blight's shadow tainting his features, but his spirit shone through, a beacon of hope against the gathering gloom. "These are mere phantasms, Alara," he said, his voice steady and filled with comfort. "They hold no real power. You are stronger than your anxieties. You are the Shadowborn Guardian." His words reverberated within her, igniting a spark of defiance in the suffocating darkness. She gazed at Kale, his face etched with pain and resilience, and she recalled the kindness he had extended, the trust he had placed in her, even when others had rejected her. She thought of the Whisperwood, its ancient groves, its hidden clearings, its vibrant life, all imperiled by the blight. She thought of its inhabitants, the deer, the birds, the spirits, all depending on her protection. And then, she remembered her mother. Not the blurred, sorrowful apparition, but the memory of her loving embrace, her gentle smile, her unwavering belief. She recalled her mother's words spoken long ago, when Alara had felt lost and adrift. "You are special, Alara. You carry a light within, a strength that none can extinguish. Never forget that." The visions began to dissipate, their power waning before her newfound determination. She squared her shoulders, her silver eyes blazing with resolve. She would not surrender to fear. She would not yield to uncertainty. She would fight for the Whisperwood, for Kale, for her mother, for all who believed in her. She drew a deep breath, channeling strength from the earth beneath her feet, from the air around her, from the very heart of the Whisperwood. She reached out and grasped Kale's hand, his touch grounding her, anchoring her to the present. "I am ready," she declared, her voice ringing out, clear and resolute. "I will not fail." The glade shimmered anew, the golden light blazing, banishing the darkness. The visions vanished, leaving Alara and Kale standing before Anya, the ancient arboreal spirit. Anya's eyes, while still piercing, held a glimmer of warmth. "You have confronted your terrors, Alara Shadowborn. You have demonstrated your courage and your compassion. You are worthy." She extended a branch towards Alara, and a beam of sunlight coalesced into a radiant golden stone, pulsating with warmth and energy, the Sunstone. "Take it, child," Anya said. "Wield it wisely. And remember, true strength resides not in raw power, but in the resolve to face one's own darkness." Illusions of the Moonpetal. The air inside Moonpetal Cave pressed in, a stifling blanket compared to the Whisperwood's airy expanse. It carried the cloying scent of turned earth and something akin to overripe blooms. Alara's skin prickled. She tightened her cloak. The Sunstone, a comforting ember against her sternum, offered meager solace in the heavy atmosphere. "The Moonpetal feeds on uncertainty," Kale announced, his voice echoing off unseen reaches. He leaned hard on his staff, a spectral weariness etched on his face. The trek to Anya, coupled with the subsequent trial, had taken a dire toll, and the blight festering on his shoulder flared with renewed virulence. "It crafts mirages born of your deepest anxieties. Trust your gut, Alara. Believe in what you know." "Easier professed than practiced," she mused, her gaze flicking around the space. Their entry point had already dissolved into shadow. Before them, a faint track beckoned, barely visible in the soft, unearthly luminescence that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. They began their cautious advance, each footfall hesitant. The oppressive quiet was broken only by the infrequent plink of water from the unseen depths. After what stretched into an eternity, the passage broadened into a more expansive chamber. Then the visions began to manifest. Subtleties, at first. Fleeting shadows at the periphery of her vision, a phantom susurrus riding on a non-existent breeze. Alara clutched the Sunstone, anchoring herself to its warmth, to Kyle's presence beside her. Abruptly the ground lurched beneath her, one moment solid rock, the next sucking mud, the reek of decay assaulting her nostrils. She stumbled, reaching for Kale, her fingers grasping only empty space. Gone, panic clenched at her heart. "Kale?" she called, her voice a tremulous thread. "Where are you?" Only the mocking reverberation of her own terror answered. Through roiling mists that had spontaneously materialized, she glimpsed them. Her parents, framed by their old cottage, a place unseen for years. Tendrils of smoke curled from the chimney, painting a fantasy of domestic tranquility that had eluded them in life. "Alara," her mother's voice gentle yet laced with the familiar weariness Alara knew so well. "Is that you, child?" Alara's spirit surged. She yearned to race to them, to drown in their embrace, to finally hear the words of love and approval she craved, but something staunchly resisted. A flicker of doubt, a silent plea from the Sunstone, a hesitant step forward. "Mother? Father?" Her father emerged from the doorway, his face a mask of disappointment. "Look at you," he chastised, his tone sharp. "Covered in filth and still chasing fanciful notions. Why couldn't you have simply been normal? Why couldn't you have fit in?" The words struck like a physical blow, echoes of the myriad unspoken accusations, the ceaseless judgments she had endured since childhood. Tears stung her eyes. "We tried, Alara," her mother lamented, a note of sorrow in her voice that felt like a personal condemnation. "We tried to shield you, but you were always different, a blight upon our family." The cottage wavered, the idyllic facade crumbling into a vision of the village square. The villagers materialized, their faces contorted with hate, eyes blazing with prejudice. They pointed, whispering epithets. "Witch," "abomination." Alara flinched, hands flying to her face, desperately trying to blot out the sight, the sound, the crushing weight of their contempt. This was her deepest fear, her core insecurity, that she was inherently unlovable, unwanted, a millstone around the necks of those she knew. The illusion amplified. The villagers advanced, hands reaching, clawing. She could taste their animosity, their fear, their fervent desire to expunge her, to obliterate her existence. Eyes squeezed shut, tears streamed down her face. She longed to simply vanish, to cease, to escape the prison of her own mind. "Ilara!" The voice cleaved through the illusion like a glacial shard. Kale's, but stronger, more resonant. "Look at me, Ilara!" Hesitation warred with compulsion. She dreaded opening her eyes, fearing what she would confront. Yet, the urgency in his tone prevailed. Slowly she raised her head. The village had evaporated. Her parents were no more. The mire was gone. She stood within the cavern once more, the surreal light caressing the walls with its otherworldly embrace. And Kale was there, hand extended, his gaze locked on hers. But changed. His face, gaunt, his skin, almost translucent. The blight had metastasized, inky tendrils climbing his neck and snaking down his arm. He appeared on the verge of collapse. "Kale," she whispered, her voice raw. "What's happening?" He managed a wan smile. "The moon petal thrives on vulnerability, Ilara. It exploits your demons, but it also gauges your fortitude. It unveils what fuels your fight." He faltered, his knees threatening to buckle. Ilara surged forward, catching him before he fell. His body radiated feverish heat. "You must resist, Ilara," he rasped, barely audible. "You must believe. You are stronger than you perceive. You are the guardian the Whisperwood requires." His words, a tenuous lifeline. Reminders of all she had learned, all she had weathered. She was no longer the helpless, ostracized girl. She was Ilara, descendant of Shadowborn guardians, wielder of the Sunstone, protector of the Whisperwood. Eyes shut, she focused on the Sunstone's heat, on the feel of his weight within her grasp. She channeled the essence of the Whisperwood, the power coursing through her, the resilience residing within her very core. She thrust back against the doubt, the dread, the ingrained insecurities. She banished the phantasms, one by one, until only reality remained, the cavern, Kael, and her own unwavering will. When she opened her eyes, the blight was retreating, the darkness fading from Kale's flesh. His breathing regulated, color returning to his face. He gazed at her, his eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Ilara," he affirmed, his voice gaining strength. "You confronted your demons and prevailed." He straightened, distancing himself slightly, though his hand remained on her arm for support. The cavern shimmered again, and in the heart of the chamber, hovering weightlessly, a single, radiant petal manifested. It pulsed with an ethereal light, embodying the very spirit of the moon. "The moon petal," Kale breathed, his voice laced with wonder. "It is yours, Ilara. You have proven your worth." Reaching for the stars. The moon petal throbbed gently in Ilara's grasp, its spectral radiance, a guiding star as they exited Moon Petal Cave, nightfall deepening around them. Kale leaned heavily on his staff, his complexion still ashen, but renewed purpose sharpened the gleam in his eyes. "The star shard lies ahead," he stated, his voice gravelly yet resolute. "It awaits atop Mount Cinderpeak, the Whisperwood's loftiest sentinel." Ilara's gaze lifted to the distant peak, a serrated silhouette against the plum-colored sky. A tremor ran through her, a premonition beyond the mere chill. Cinderpeak held a dark reputation, not only for its altitude but for the capricious tempests that perpetually besieged its crown. "Are you certain you're up to this?" she inquired, concern wrinkling the corners of her eyes. Kale seemed revitalized, but hardly completely healed. A faint smile touched his lips. "Sufficiently. Besides," he added, his gaze locking with hers, "I have a Shadowborn guardian watching over me now." A blush warmed Ilara's cheeks, the unexpected compliment a welcome heat. She stowed the moon petal in her satchel, its cool heft a source of silent comfort. "Then let's not delay the star shard any longer." Cinderpeak's foothills presented a misleading calm, a gradual incline of verdant, moss-draped stones and ancient, twisted trees. Yet as they climbed, the terrain sharpened, vegetation thinned, and the wind became a constant, savage assault. The air grew scant with each upward stride, each inhalation a deliberate act. Kale advanced slowly, each movement deliberate, depending heavily on his staff. Ilara, conversely, felt an upsurge of strength, a lightness in her steps unknown until now. It was as if the moon petal had not only mended Kale, but imbued her with a hardiness she hadn't realized she possessed. "Rest a moment," she encouraged, halting by a stand of wind-scoured pines. Kale nodded in gratitude, collapsing onto a moss-covered boulder. "The star shard possesses unimaginable power," he gasped. "Enough to strike at the heart of the Shadow Blight, but the mountain, it tests the mettle of those who seek it." Alara surveyed their situation. The sky deepened toward ebony. The wind howled like a tormented spirit, lashing her hair across her face. The mercury had plummeted, and her breath bloomed in the frigid air. "What sort of trials?" she questioned, though a part of her already understood. This pilgrimage, like the last, would demand more than mere physical endurance. Kale fixed her with a somber stare. "The mountain. It thrives on dread. It amplifies misgivings, swells weaknesses. You must remain resolute, Ilara. Resolute in spirit as well as skill." She returned his gaze, her own determination solidifying. She had confronted her deepest fears in the Moonpetal Cave. She had stared into the void of her own self-doubt and emerged fortified. She would not yield now. As if answering her resolve, the wind intensified, swirling snow around them in a disorienting whiteout. The first flakes pricked her skin like frozen needles. "We need shelter," Kale bellowed above the gale, but no haven existed. The landscape was desolate, stripped bare by the unyielding wind and cold. Their only recourse was to press forward, to ascend higher, to reach the summit before the storm consumed them entirely. The climb became a brutal gauntlet. The wind clawed at their garments, the snow obscured their sight, and ice glazed the stones, transforming each step into a precarious gamble. Several times, Alara lost her footing, regaining balance just in time. Kale labored, his weakened condition making him vulnerable. Alara knew she had to act. She shut her eyes, centering herself on the energy within, the same power that had conjured the Moonpetal. She extended her senses, feeling the mountain, the wind's fury, the snow's bite, the very essence of the tempest. An idea ignited in her mind, a bold, almost reckless scheme. She opened her eyes, her silver irises blazing with purpose. "Kale, hold tight," she yelled. He regarded her, confusion clouding his features, but he obeyed, gripping her arm firmly. Alara inhaled deeply, then channeled her power. She concentrated on the wind, on its relentless force, its volatile energy. Yet, instead of combating it, she attempted to guide it, to mold it, to bend it to her will. Slowly, miraculously, the wind began to comply. It spiraled around them, no longer as an adversary, but as an extension of her power. The snow dissipated, creating a brief oasis of serenity around them. Alara extended her free hand, focusing her will on the icy precipice ahead. She visualized it thawing, softening, reshaping itself into a pathway, a route to the peak. It was an immense strain, sapping her strength, but she persevered. The rocks began to shimmer with a faint argent luminescence, and as she concentrated they began to undulate, to melt and remold, forming a winding staircase that pierced the heart of the storm. "Extraordinary!" Kale breathed, his eyes wide with astonishment. You're shaping the very elements." Alara remained silent. She was too focused, too consumed by the task. She kept her attention fixed on the summit, willing the path to continue, to lead them to the star shard. The trek remained arduous, the wind unrelenting, but now they possessed a passage, a lifeline carved from the storm itself. Alara led the way, her silver eyes gleaming like twin stars in the swirling snow, her power a bulwark against the mountain's rage. As they neared the crest, the storm began to abate, as if conceding defeat. The wind diminished, the snow lessened, and the clouds broke, revealing a sliver of moon-kissed sky. Then, they stood at the top. The summit of Mount Cinderpeak was a bleak, wind-swept plateau. At its center, resting on a bedrock pedestal, lay the star shard. It defied description. A splinter of unadulterated, crystalline energy. It pulsed with an inner fire, a radiance that seemed to emanate from the cosmos itself. It refracted every conceivable hue, a vibrant swirl of celestial beauty. Alara approached tentatively, drawn to it as a moth to a flickering flame. She reached out her hand, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. As her fingertips grazed the star shard's cool surface, a surge of energy coursed through her, a wave of pristine, unbridled force. It was as if the stars themselves whispered to her, revealing their enigmas, their sagacity, their immemorial might. She gasped, overwhelmed by the sensation, but she did not recoil. She grasped it firmly, absorbing the energy. allowing it to permeate her, to purify her, to transfigure her. When the surge subsided, Alara felt altered, renewed, stronger, more assured, more connected to the fabric of the universe. She knew, beyond any doubt, that she was prepared to confront any obstacle ahead, prepared to fulfill her destiny as the Shadowborn Guardian, prepared to redeem the Whisperwood. Kale gazed at her, his expression a mixture of pride and hope. "The Star Shard has chosen you, Alara," he said, his voice resonating with reverence. "You are the prophesied one." Alara regarded him, her silver eyes shimmering with newfound resolve. She lifted the Star Shard, its light illuminating her face, and raised it high above her head. "Then let the blight cower," she proclaimed, her voice echoing across the mountain peak. "For the Shadowborn Guardian has arrived." Whispers of corruption. The descent from Cinder Peak was a stark contrast to their ascent, the vibrant elation of elemental command now eclipsed by a gnawing apprehension lodged deep within Alara, where once the air had invigorated, now a sickly sweet miasma clung to the lungs, like the exhalation of a festering wound. The Whisperwood's emerald tapestry was unraveling, consumed by jaundiced yellows and bruised purples that crept across the land. "It's succumbing," Alara whispered, her voice lost in the susurrus of tainted foliage. Kale, relying on a twisted bough for support, offered a somber nod. "The shadow blight accelerates. It's outpacing our estimations." A ragged cough punctuated the stillness. "The Star Shard, a double-edged gift. It amplified your gifts and stirred the blight's slumber." Zephyr, never one to linger, kept close to Alara, his usual exuberance replaced by a frantic flutter of his rainbow wings. "Even I feel it," he squeaked, unusually subdued. "The very air, viscous, like pulling through treacle, and the whispers, a cacophony now, laced with malice." Whispers Alara knew well, insidious tendrils of sound that wormed into her thoughts, perverting them into grotesque mockeries. She fought them back, anchoring herself to the Star Shard's warmth. With each step, the corruption deepened, trees contorted in silent agony, their limbs skeletal claws reaching for the sky. Underfoot, the earth squelched, coated in a slick ebony residue. The cloying sweetness intensified, threatening to overwhelm. A sudden commotion shattered the heavy silence. Alara's hand instinctively flew to the hilt of her makeshift blade. A creature exploded from the undergrowth, its form hideously altered. It was a moon-petal deer, once a beacon of grace and ethereal beauty. Now its coat was a matted mess, streaked with black ichor, its antlers snapped and deformed. Malevolent crimson light blazed in its eyes, its muzzle curled in a feral snarl. "Alara, look out!" Kale's warning cracked through the air. Before she could react, a grove badger, its playful features twisted into a mask of fury, charged into view. Dark tendrils, pulsating with a noxious energy, radiated from its eyes and mouth. Zephyr launched a flurry of illusions, but the blight had rendered the creatures impervious to such tricks. They batted at the shimmering phantasms with savage disinterest, their focus locked on Alara and Kael. "They're lost to it," Alara said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "The blight controls them utterly." "We must defend ourselves," Kael declared, his gaze hardening. "But spare them as much as possible. Our goal is to sever the blight's hold." The fight was a grim ballet of desperation. Alara channeled the Star Shard, conjuring gusts to throw their attackers back, raising earthen barriers to shield Kael. But the corrupted beasts were tireless, driven by an insatiable hunger. The moon-petal deer lowered its ravaged antlers, charging directly at Alara. She dodged, unleashing a jet of water to engulf the creature. The water hissed and steamed as it struck the corrupted fur, eliciting a pained shriek from the deer. Simultaneously, the grove badger lunged at Kael, its claws extended. Weakened, Kael fought to ward off the attack. Seeing his plight, Alara unleashed a burst of flame, forcing the badger to recoil. "We can't sustain this," Alara panted, her lungs afire. "There are too many." As if summoned by her words, more warped creatures emerged from the shadows. Squirrels with needle, sharp incisors, birds with soot, stained plumage, rabbits with incandescent eyes. The Whisperwood, once a haven, had become a charnel ground for the blight's insidious work. "We need sanctuary," Kael rasped. "A place to regroup and recalibrate." Zephyr, wings tattered and stained, pointed towards a colossal oak dominating the horizon. "The ancient oaks, they resist darkness. Refuge may lie there." With renewed resolve, Alara and Kale battled towards the ancient oak, repelling the relentless surge of corrupted beasts. The air thickened, the whispers intensified, the oppressive darkness deepened. Reaching the oak, they discovered a small haven beneath its sprawling canopy. The earth here remained verdant, untouched by the encroaching corruption. The air tasted cleaner, purer. A reprieve. Alara sighed, sinking against the tree's gnarled trunk. Kale collapsed beside her, his face ashen. For now, he cautioned, but the blight advances. It will claim even this sanctuary. Zephyr perched on a branch above, his multifaceted eyes scanning the perimeter. It waxes stronger, he twittered, his voice laced with fear. A chill I feel, a hand upon my heart. Alara closed her eyes, summoning the star shard's warmth, feeling its power, its light, yet also sensing the encroaching darkness, the corruption clawing to extinguish it. We race against time, she declared, her voice filled with urgency. We must gather the other artifacts and discover how to halt the blight before it consumes all. Kale nodded, his gaze resolute. Then no time to spare. The Whisperwood is lost, one darkened leaf at a time. He looked at Alara, a mix of hope and anxiety etched upon his face. The fate of this place, perhaps the world, rests upon your shoulders, Alara. Do you accept this burden? Alara opened her eyes, her silver gaze unflinching. I do. Preparing for battle, the air, thick with the cloying sweetness of rot, pressed down on them as they hobbled through the Whisperwood. A jaundiced light, filtered through diseased foliage, leached all color from the world, leaving only shades of decay. Kale's breath hitched with each step, his weight supported by a crudely fashioned staff. Alara, despite the star shard's power thrumming beneath her skin, felt the forest despair like a suffocating blanket, the blight's touch a constant, chilling vibration. The temple, Kale croaked, gesturing towards the barely discernible outline of weathered stone swallowed by the twisted trees. Almost there. Once a vibrant sanctuary, the temple now displayed the ravages of the encroaching gloom. Fissures webbed its ancient face, obscuring the once exquisite carvings beneath a shroud of creeping moss and festering shadow blight. Yet, crossing the threshold, Alara sensed a spark of residual power clinging to the stones, a fragile ember in the overwhelming darkness. The main chamber remained largely unscathed, the circular altar at its center emitting a soft, unearthly radiance. This was it, the nexus where, united, the artifacts could unleash the energy required to beat back the blight. A shared glance of grim resolve passed between them as they approached. With meticulous care, Alara placed the star shard upon the altar. The crystal resonated with potent force as it touched the ancient stone, humming a song of forgotten power. Kale, his hands trembling, set down the whisper-wind orb. Its swirling mists flared briefly, before settling into a measured, rhythmic pulse. Lastly, from beneath her tunic, Alara produced the sunstone amulet, its comforting warmth, a stark contrast to the blight's icy tendrils, and laid it carefully beside the others. As the three relics came together, a visible wave of energy swept through the chamber, the air itself shimmering. The altar's faint glow intensified, bathing the room in a soft, otherworldly light. Alara felt a surge of invigorating power coursing through her, the artifacts amplifying her own abilities, pushing her to the brink. Now, Kale said, his voice tight with strain. Focus. Channel the energy. Prepare. They sat, facing the altar, eyes closed, minds reaching out to the palpable ancient energy. Alara centered on the star shard, its chaotic power a reflection of the inner turmoil threatening to consume her. Plunging deeper, she sought understanding, control over the tempestuous force within. Visions flooded her mind, cascading nebulae, exploding stars, the untamed force of creation and annihilation. It was terrifying, exhilarating, consuming. Kale, his connection to the Whisperwood fraying under the blight's assault, fought to maintain his concentration. He reached for the forest's ancient spirits, begging for guidance, for strength. He felt their agony, their despair, the slow death of the world they had sworn to safeguard. But amidst the bleakness, a thread of hope remained, a belief in Alara, the Shadowborn guardian. Time dissolved as they meditated, their minds entwined with the Whisperwood's destiny. Alara felt a metamorphosis within, a merging of her own essence with the artifact's power. The chaos began to crystallize, to find a point, a purpose. She was no longer merely a girl burdened by prophecy, but a vessel, a conduit for the ancient power capable of saving the forest. KL, emboldened by Alara's unwavering focus, felt a resurgence of determination. The blight might devour the forest, but it would not extinguish his spirit. He would fight, protect, stand beside Alara until the end. Finally, what felt like an age later, Alara opened her eyes. They burned with a heightened silver intensity, reflecting the power surging through her. She looked at KL, his face etched with exhaustion, but his gaze firm. "I think," she whispered, "I think I'm ready." KL nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Then let us prepare for what awaits." The following hours were spent in hushed preparation. Despite his fatigue, KL painstakingly cleaned and honed his ancestral sword, its steel gleaming in the ethereal light. Guided by an unfamiliar instinct, Alara studied the star shard, her fingers tracing the intricate designs carved into its surface. She felt an inexplicable connection to the crystal, a profound understanding of its capabilities. She experimented with the energy, channeling it through her hands, learning to modulate its flow, its intensity. She practiced forming shields of light, interweaving them with strands of shadow, constructing defenses against the blight's vile corruption. As dusk fell, draping the temple in lengthening shadows, Alara and Cal stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to confront the encroaching darkness. The air buzzed with anticipation, the silence punctuated only by the soft thrum of the altar. "Alara," Kyle said, his voice grave. "The blight, it will test you. It will exploit your fears, your doubts. Remember who you are. Remember why we fight." Alara met his gaze, her silver eyes burning with conviction. "I know, I won't fail you." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch firm. "I know you won't. You are stronger than you realize." A pregnant silence descended, a final moment of quiet fortitude before the coming storm. Alara gazed out at the blighted forest, her heart aching for the dying trees, the twisted creatures, the land slowly succumbing to the darkness. She knew the battle ahead would be brutal, pushing her beyond her limits. But fear held no sway. She was prepared. "The blight draws near," Alara announced, breaking the stillness. "I can feel it. Then we confront it," Kale responded, drawing his sword. The blade sang as it cleared the scabbard, a lament in the failing light. "For the Whisperwood, for the Whisperwood," Alara echoed, her hand instinctively touching the star shard at her hip. The crystal pulsed with energy, a silent promise of power, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching despair. Together, they stepped from the temple into the heart of the blighted forest to face their destiny. The shadow blight awaited. Assault on the temple. The temple's ancient stones shuddered, a herald of the tempest poised to unleash. Alara grasped the star shard, its chill surface a stark contrast to the sudden conflagration blossoming within. The artifacts combined might course through her, a luminous counterpoint to the encroaching gloom. "They're here," Kale rasped, his voice a taut wire. He leaned heavily on his staff, exhaustion etching lines on his face, yet his gaze burned with unwavering purpose. "Brace yourself, Alara." Before she could reply, a tide of ebony crashed against the temple walls. Grotesque beings, warped travesties of nature, poured from the corrupted woods, malignant emerald light blazing in their eyes. They battered and clawed at the weathered stone, their bestial growls tearing through the air. "Defend the entrance, Kale," Alara's voice resonated with newfound authority. "I need to concentrate." Kale nodded, jaw clenched tight. He raised his staff, and a shimmering aureole sprang into existence, shielding the entrance. The creatures slammed against it, their forms momentarily fracturing under the energy's assault, but they persisted, their numbers seemingly infinite. Alara retreated further into the temple's core, the star shard thrumming in her grip. She sensed the shadow blight's presence, a frigid, insidious tendril probing for purchase. It felt amplified, emboldened by its burgeoning dominion. A sibilant whisper wormed into her mind, a voice both intimate and alien. "So, the little witch fancies herself a champion?" It was a venomous caress, designed to break her resolve. "You are insignificant, Alara, a blemish upon your ancestors' legacy," just as Grimfang so eloquently put it. The mere mention of Grimfang sent a glacial prickle tracing down her spine. The memory of his cutting barbs, his indictments, remained a festering wound. He had weaponized her deepest fears, twisting her vulnerabilities into instruments of pain. "He spoke the truth, didn't he?" The voice continued, its tone dripping with false concern. "You are an outcast, a societal leper. Oakhaven rejected you, your own mother." The insinuation hung in the air, a poisoned dart. Alara's fist tightened, the star shard biting into her flesh. "Silence," she declared, her voice echoing through the hallowed space. "I refuse to listen to your fabrications." "Fabrications?" The voice chuckled, a desolate, unsettling sound. "Or truths you are too cowardly to confront. You are a byproduct of apprehension and prejudice, Alara. And apprehension is my most potent weapon." As the voice concluded its taunt, a form materialized before her, solidifying from the surrounding gloom. It was elongated and emaciated, its features concealed by swirling shadows, but its eyes radiated the same virulent green light as the horrors besieging the temple. It was an emissary of the Shadow Blight, a tangible embodiment of its defiling essence. "You are powerless against me," the apparition hissed, its voice a grating rasp. "You are too frail, too exposed. You are shackled by your history, weighed down by the scorn of others." Alara stood firm, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could feel the Shadow Blight probing her consciousness, seeking out weaknesses, exploiting her doubts, but she would not yield. She had journeyed too far, sacrificed too much, to succumb to its insidious grasp. "I am not the person you perceive me to be," she retorted, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. "I am not the frightened child you seek to manipulate. I am Alara, and I am a guardian." She brandished the star shard, its radiance flaring with renewed vigor. The artifact's energy surged through her, a tidal wave that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. The shadowy figure recoiled, its form momentarily dissolving. "You cannot fathom the magnitude of the power you command, child," it snarled. "It will devour you as it did those who preceded you." "I know no fear," Alara proclaimed, her voice ringing with conviction. "I embrace my destiny. I will wield this power to safeguard the Whisperwood, to shield the world from your blight." Outside, the conflict raged on. KL fought with the ferocity of a caged lion, his staff a blur of light and force. But the creatures were unrelenting, their sheer number overwhelming. The barrier he had erected flickered and buckled, on the verge of collapse. Alara could feel Kale's strain, his dwindling reserves. She knew she had to intervene swiftly, before the blight consumed him entirely. Focusing her will, Alara channeled the artifact's power through the star shard. She would not permit the darkness to triumph. "This temple will crumble," the shadowy figure roared, lunging towards Alara, "and you will be buried within its ruins." Alara met the onslaught head-on, her eyes blazing with defiance. The star shard hummed with untapped potential, poised to unleash its full might. The fate of the Whisperwood, the fate of the world, hung precariously in the balance. The shadowy figure lunged, its taloned hand reaching for her throat. Alara evaded the attack with a swift, practiced maneuver. She raised the star shard, and a lance of pure light erupted from its apex, striking the figure squarely in the chest. The figure emitted a tortured scream. Its form spasmed violently, the shadows swirling around it like embers fading to ash. It stumbled backward, its eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and pain. "This is far from over," it hissed, its voice a mere whisper. "This is merely the first encounter. The blight will engulf everything, and you will be powerless to stop the deluge." With a final, desperate expulsion of energy, the figure dissipated, dissolving back into the ether. But Alara knew it was not vanquished, merely weakened. It would return, more formidable and more resolute than before. She turned her attention to Kale, her heart pounding with apprehension. The barrier he had summoned was fracturing, the creatures pressing inward with each passing second. She had to assist him, or all would be irrevocably lost. Summoning her strength, Alara extended her hand, directing the star shard's energy outward. A wave of luminescence flooded the temple entrance, repelling the creatures with staggering force. They recoiled, hissing and screeching, their forms momentarily destabilizing in the purifying glow. Kael stumbled backward, his face ashen and drawn. He gazed at Alara with a mixture of wonder and relief. "Thank you," he managed, his voice raspy. "I don't know how much longer I could have contained them." "We are far from finished," Alara replied, her eyes sweeping the blighted forest. "This was merely a prelude of what is to come. The Shadow Blight will not concede defeat readily." We must be prepared for its inevitable return. She understood that the true conflict had only just commenced. The Shadow Blight was a fearsome adversary, and its power swelled with each passing sunrise. But she was no longer the timorous girl who had been banished to the Whisperwood. She was a guardian, empowered by artifacts of old, and she would not waver in her commitment to defend the land from encroaching darkness. Alara peered into the depths of the Whisperwood, her connection to the star shard deepening, preparing for the inevitable conflict ahead. The power within. The temple shuddered, not from the marauding blight spawn, but from the untamed force coursing through Alara. The sunstone, nestled against her breast, radiated a heat that battled the creeping frost of the Shadow Blight. Moonpetal, clutched tight in her left hand, emitted a serene, pulsing luminescence, a defiant spark against the encroaching gloom. And in her right, the star shard hummed, a bottled cosmos eager to unleash its celestial fury. Resistance is futile, child. The Blight's voice hammered, an invasive mental violation, a serpent coiling around her sanity. You are frail, fractured, forsaken just as they predicted. Glimpses, unwelcome and sharp, flashed behind her eyelids. Scornful visages, accusatory gestures, the implacable gates of Oakhaven slamming shut. The mental intrusion intensified. They judged you correctly, Alara. You are worthless. She faltered, the combined artifacts suddenly an unbearable weight. Doubt, an old adversary, threatened to drown her. At the threshold, Kale, his face ashen but unwavering, fought with desperate grace, his staff a whirling vortex of energy, repelling the relentless tide of corruption. Each movement was economical, precise, honed by years of dedication, yet Alara saw the lines of exhaustion etched deep in his face. He couldn't withstand them forever. No, she choked, banishing the haunting visions. She centered herself on the sunstone, drinking deep from its vital essence. She recalled the yielding earth beneath her feet in the Whisperwood, the resinous tang of pine after the rain, the quiet sanctuary she had discovered in solitude. I am not broken, she asserted, her voice shaky but resolute. I am not frail. A shadowy figure materialized before her, a towering specter swathed in obscurity, its eyes twin embers of malice. A grotesque parody of humanity, a warped mirror reflecting her deepest insecurities. Behold yourself. The entity sneered, venom lacing its tone. Clinging to baubles feigning heroism. You are a leper, Alara, an exile. No one will ever accept you. The Blight's barbs were like slivers of ice, piercing her spirit. She envisioned her father's disappointed countenance, heard the villagers' hushed accusations of witchcraft, felt the sharp sting of rejection. The specter extended a taloned hand, its touch promising annihilation. Alara recoiled, but held her ground. She squeezed Moonpetal, its soothing radiance a balm against the Blight's poison. She remembered the rustling willows, the gentle creatures of the wood who had embraced her without hesitation, Kale's steadfast friendship. You are mistaken, she countered, her voice gaining strength. I am not alone. She focused her will, channeling the artifact's power, drawing on the ancient energies resonating within her. The sunstone blazed, Moonpetal glowed with an unearthly incandescence, and the star shard vibrated with latent force. The air crackled, distorting the specter's form. This power, it is not yours to wield, the entity hissed, a tremor of fear in its voice. You are unworthy. It belongs to those who need it. Alara snapped back, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. It belongs to the Whisperwood. It belongs to me. She raised the star shard aloft, its facets catching the light, scattering it in a dazzling spectrum. The temple filled with an ethereal radiance, obliterating shadows, repelling the advancing darkness. I am not who you perceive me to be, Alara declared. I am Alara of the Whisperwood, and I will not succumb to fear. Her silver eyes ignited with fierce intensity, a beacon of hope against the encroaching night. The light intensified, swelling until it suffused the entire temple. The spectral figure recoiled, its form dissolving and fracturing. No! It howled, its voice fading to a whisper. This is not the conclusion. With a final surge of energy, Alara unleashed the combined power of the artifacts. A wave of pure light cascaded through the temple, purging it of the Shadow Blight's taint. The Blight creatures outside shrieked in agony and fled, retreating into the abyss. The light ebbed, leaving Alara breathless but unbroken. The temple was still, save for the labored breathing of Kael, who leaned heavily on his staff, his face pale but a relieved smile playing on his lips. "Alara," he breathed, his voice raspy. You prevailed." She lowered the star shard, her hand trembling. The sunstone and moon petal throbbed softly against her skin, their energy receding. She gazed at her hands, her silver eyes still faintly luminous, and saw not the hands of a rejected outcast, but those of a protector, a guardian. "It is not finished," she stated, her voice filled with newfound resolve. "This was only the beginning." Kyle nodded, straightening. "Then we prepare," he said. "We gather our strength, we confront the darkness as one." He approached her, his gaze filled with warmth and admiration. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch a reassuring anchor. "The power resides within you, Alara," he said. "Never forget that." She met his eyes, her own reflecting the artifact's light, the glimmer of hope. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril and uncertainty, but fear no longer held sway. She had confronted her demons, embraced her destiny, and unearthed the strength within to champion what she believed in. The battle had just commenced, but Alara stood ready. She was a guardian, and she would not falter. The stillness of the temple was broken by the subtle stirring of leaves beyond the walls. The blight spawn were regrouping, amassing their forces for another onslaught. But this time, Alara awaited them. She stood resolute, the star shard raised high, her silver eyes blazing with the light of hope, the light of defiance, the light of a guardian awakened. The Whisperwood had found its protector, and the shadow blight had encountered its reckoning. The dormant power within Alara had been unleashed, and the darkness would soon learn to fear the dawn. Truth revealed. The air resonated, no longer with the blight's crushing weight, but with the unleashed, volatile energy Alara channeled. The inky vortex strangling the glade unraveled, dissolving into wisps of shadow that scattered like a disturbed rookery. Alara wavered, the sunstone a furnace against her chest, the moon petal's cool touch soothing her palm, the star shard throbbing with contained light at her side. The artifacts combined might have repelled the encroaching gloom, yet victory felt precarious, a house of cards threatening to tumble. Exhaustion lined Kale's face, yet his eyes blazed with relief as he offered her a steadying hand. "Alara, you did it. You pushed it back." Gratefully, she leaned on him, her breath hitching in her throat. "But it's not gone," she breathed, barely audible. "I still sense it, lurking, waiting." As if summoned, the dissipating shadows reformed, solidifying into a solitary, towering figure cloaked in midnight. Diminished, yes, but radiating a chilling malevolence that settled like frostbite on the glade. "Impressive," the blight's voice boomed, a gravelly resonance that vibrated within her very core. "You command the artifacts with skill, little guardian. But power alone is insufficient. Knowledge is key, and you, Alara, are woefully ignorant." Straightening, Alara shook off the weariness, threatening to engulf her. "What do you mean?" The shadowy figure chuckled, a sound that grated like rusted hinges. "You fancy yourself a savior, champion of this insignificant wood. You are nothing more than a piece on a board, a tool to be spent. You cling to a fabricated past, a comforting story about your parents, but you know nothing." Kale advanced, his hand instinctively finding the grip of his sword. "Don't listen to it, Alara. It's preying on your fears, trying to weaken you." "Silence, cur!" the blight snapped, its gaze flicking towards Kale. "Your loyalty is touching, ultimately inconsequential. The girl deserves to know the truth, however bitter." The blight's focus returned to Alara. "You believe your parents perished protecting you from the village's prejudice, yes? That they were simply casualties?" Alara's brow furrowed. "They sacrificed everything for my escape. What other explanation could there be?" The blight's form seemed to twist, as if savoring her confusion. "Sacrifice indeed, but not as you perceive it. They did not die because of the villagers. They died for me." Alara gasped. "That's impossible. You lie." "Do I?" The blight countered, its voice laced with sinister amusement. "Consider it, Alara. Why were you shunned? What made you different? Why did whispers follow you even in infancy? It wasn't merely fear, little guardian. It was recognition." The blight paused, letting its words fester. "Your parents were not simply unfortunate victims, they were initiates. They grasped the true nature of the shadow blight, its immense power, the danger it posed. But they also understood they couldn't vanquish me head-on. Not then. So they—" Alara's voice faltered, dread seizing her throat. They weakened me, the Blight concluded, its voice dripping with dark satisfaction. They enacted a ritual, a desperate act of self-annihilation, funneling their life force to curtail my influence, to confine me within the Whisperwood. They knew it wouldn't destroy me, but it would buy time for you to be born, to mature, to eventually awaken. A wave of nausea crested over Alara. The world spun, the trees a dizzying vortex of green. Her parents, sacrificing themselves to hamstring the Blight? It defied comprehension. Everything she held true about her history, her parents' devotion, crumbled to dust. "But why?" she croaked, tears welling in her eyes. "Why not just flee? Why involve me?" "Because you, Alara, are the linchpin," the Blight declared, its voice tinged with a strange blend of resentment and anticipation. "You are a descendant of the Shadowborn Guardians, the only lineage able to wield the artifacts and ultimately to expunge me from this realm. Your parents understood this. They knew their sacrifice would merely postpone the inevitable, that one day you would rise to confront me. But they hoped, foolishly, that you would be formidable enough to succeed where they failed." Kale's grip on her arm tightened. "Alara, disregard everything it says. It seeks to demoralize you, to turn you against yourself." Alara tuned him out, her gaze riveted to the shadowy figure. "So, they exploited me? My entire existence? A means to an end?" "Not entirely," the Blight conceded, its tones softening, almost seductively. "They harbored affection for you, of a sort, but their love paled in comparison to their duty, to their dread of my power. They perceived you as a weapon, a tool to be honed and released, and now, here you stand, prepared to fulfill your destiny." "No," Alara whispered, shaking her head fiercely. "No, it's a lie." "Is it?" the Blight pressed, its wraith-like form encroaching. "Reflect on your life, Alara. Were you ever truly cherished, truly accepted, or were you perpetually an outcast, a pariah, branded by the very power you now command? The villagers feared you, your parents exploited you. And now Kale, your loyal companion, views you as merely a defense against the encroaching darkness." Sword drawn, Kale positioned himself between them. "Stay away from her!" Ignoring him, the Blight remained fixed on Alara. "You are alone, Alara. Always have been, always will be. Embrace the shadows, embrace the power coursing through your veins. Join me, and together, we can remold this world in our design." Tears streamed down Alara's cheeks, distorting her vision. The Blight's words were poisonous darts, twisting and festering in her soul. Doubt clawed at her, whispering insidious questions. Had her parents genuinely loved her, or had she been a mere pawn in their desperate scheme? Was she doomed to solitude, forever burdened by her lineage? A wave of grief crashed over her, threatening to submerge her. Grief for her parents, for the life she believed she had, for a love she may have never known. Yet beneath the sorrow, a spark of fury ignited. Fury at the Blight, for its deceit and manipulation. Fury at her parents, for the burden they bequeathed her. And fury at herself, for allowing uncertainty to take hold. "No," she declared, her voice trembling but resolute. "You're wrong. I am not alone, and I am not a weapon." The Blight emitted a mirthless chuckle. "We shall see, little guardian. We shall see." The shadowy figure unraveled into a cloud of darkness that dispersed amongst the surrounding trees, leaving Alara and Kael alone in the clearing. The air remained thick with the Blight's lingering presence, but its suffocating weight had eased slightly. Alara crumpled to her knees, the artifacts slipping from her numbed fingers. She was drained, physically and emotionally, but the Blight's revelation threatened to break her. Her parents, their sacrifice. It had irrevocably altered everything. Kael knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Alara, are you all right?" She looked up, her eyes flooded with anguish and bewilderment. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Kael. Everything I held to be true, it was all a fabrication. The Protector's destiny." The Blight's insidious words echoed, a venomous undercurrent threatening to drown Alara. Her parents' sacrifice, not a shield against the villagers' cruelty but a calculated forge to temper her into a weapon. The revelation struck her like a physical blow, leaving her gasping. Kael's steadying hand was immediate as she faltered. "Don't heed him, Alara," he urged, his voice a beacon in the churning darkness of her mind. His usually vibrant green eyes were shadowed with fatigue, yet his grip remained a constant. He thrives on uncertainty, on despair. He contorts reality. Or did he merely reveal it? The question gnawed at her, a tendril of doubt coiling around her heart. Gazing at KL, his face etched with concern, another wave of sorrow broke over her. Was her life a tapestry of deceit? The loving foundation she'd believed in now felt like a gilded cage. He speaks truth, doesn't he? She breathed, her voice a mere whisper against the sighing of blighted leaves. They never cherished me, only the potential weapon I represented. Hale's hold tightened. That's untrue. My heart knows the selfless nature of their love. How can you be so confident? Tears welled. You never knew them. Hale's gaze softened, tinged with sadness. Perhaps not directly, but I recognize the protective ferocity of true love. They gifted you their lives. What greater testament could there be? To fulfill a higher aim, she snapped back, bitterness coloring her tone. To weaken the blight, I was merely a tool. A peal of laughter, chilling and triumphant, erupted from the blight, resonating through the corrupted woods. You glimpse the truth, little guardian? Embrace your ordained path, ally with me, and together we will sculpt this world anew, improved beyond measure. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, battling the insidious pull of his words. He sought to shatter her, to exploit her anguish and puppet her will. She felt darkness seeping into her thoughts, whispering alluring promises of dominion, of vengeance. Yet beneath the pain, the uncertainty, the dread, a spark ignited. A flicker of defiance, the same tenacious spirit that had sustained her through years of alienation and solitude. Images flooded her mind. The villagers, their faces contorted by fear and prejudice, and the pain they inflicted, but also the few who had offered kindness, a simple smile, a helping gesture. She thought of KL, his unwavering trust, the comfort and acceptance she'd found in his presence. And then the Whisperwood itself, its ancient majesty and vibrant life, now stifled and twisted by the blight's corruption. The sprites and dryads, the talking creatures, all facing extinction under the shadow's relentless encroachment. They needed her. They needed the Guardian. Not as an instrument, not as a player in a timeless game, but as a shield, a protector. She faced a chasm of choice, and in that instant, recognized that her fate was not preordained. It wasn't an inheritance, forced upon her by parents or the blight. It was a path she could forge for herself. She inhaled deeply, air filling her lungs with newfound resolve. Opening her eyes, the silver within blazed with unprecedented intensity. "No!" she declared, her voice ringing clear and resolute, slicing through the blight's mocking laughter. "I will not join you. I am not your weapon. I am the guardian of the Whisperwood, and I will safeguard it, even if it requires your destruction." A roar of fury ripped from the blight, shadowy tendrils lashing out like whips. Alara stood firm, her silver gaze incandescent. She focused on the pain, the grief, the rage, channeling it into a surging tide of raw power. The artifacts she'd gathered, the sunstone, the moon petal, the heartwood, pulsed with her energy, magnifying it, focusing it. The air crackled with visible force, the ground trembling beneath her. Hale recoiled slightly, shielding his eyes from the blinding radiance. Alara raised her hands, and a lance of pure, argent light erupted from her eyes, piercing the gloom and striking the blight at its dark heart. A piercing shriek of agony echoed as the shadowy entity recoiled, the light searing its essence. The blight's form flickered erratically, its tendrils recoiling as the silver beam intensified. Cracks spiderwebbed across its shadowy armor, exposing the void within. The air around it rippled and warped, as if reality itself was unraveling. "You cannot vanquish me," the blight thundered, its voice laced with desperation. "I am eternal, the very embodiment of darkness." But Alara remained unwavering. She poured every fiber of her being into the light, driving it deeper, further into the blight's core. Visions flashed before her, her parents, their faces a blend of love and sorrow, the villagers, their features twisted by fear and resentment, Kale, his gaze reflecting trust and anticipation, and the Whisperwood, its ancient boughs reaching for the heavens, its creatures brimming with life, all relying on her strength. She would not abandon them. With a final, devastating surge of power, Alara unleashed the full might of her silver eyes. Light engulfed the blight, utterly consuming it. The shadowy form dissolved into oblivion, its screams fading into an echoing silence. The darkness receded, the crushing weight that had oppressed the whisperwood for so long lifted. The blighted leaves unfurled, their sickly gray transforming into vibrant green. The twisted branches straightened, reaching towards the sunlight with renewed vitality. A wave of cleansing energy swept through the whisperwood, mending its scars and restoring its balance. The air cleared, filled with the fragrance of blossoming flora and the melodies of birdsong. The forest creatures emerged from their hiding places, their eyes gleaming with thankfulness. Alara stood exhausted, depleted, but a profound sense of peace settled over her. The silver light in her eyes softened, yet retained a spark of strength, a promise of guardianship. She had confronted her inner demons, embraced her destiny, and liberated the whisperwood. Kale approached, his face etched with relief and admiration. He gently framed her face in his hands. "You prevailed, Alara," he whispered. "You vanquished the blight." A faint smile touched her lips. "We prevailed, Kael. We did it together." He enfolded her in a warm embrace, holding her close. "Thank you, Alara, for saving our home." Standing amidst the revitalized forest, Alara knew her journey had just begun. New trials, new perils awaited, but she was no longer the fearful, solitary girl ostracized by her village. She was the guardian of the whisperwood, prepared to confront whatever the future held. The whisperwood breathed a collective sigh of relief, the ancient trees rustling their leaves in harmonious gratitude. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, painting the forest floor with shifting patterns of light and shadow. A new chapter had commenced, one of serenity and abundance, guided by the light of the Shadowborn Guardian. The blight was gone, but the memory of its darkness would remain, a constant reminder of the importance of safeguarding the light, embracing acceptance, and choosing one's own path. Queen of the Whisperwood, the air vibrated with renewed energy, a living song that banished the blight's suffocating hush. Alara, supported by Kale's steady presence, absorbed the revitalized whisperwood. Sunlight, once strangled by encroaching shadow, filtered through the canopy, scattering shards of amber and jade across the forest floor. Where gnarled charcoal trees had stood, now rose verdant giants, limbs outstretched in jubilant welcome. Exotic blossoms, splashed with audacious hues, perfumed the air with a sweet, intoxicating fragrance carried on a playful zephyr. "It's breathtaking," Alara rasped, her voice still rough with exertion. Traces of the blight's insidious whispers lingered, chilling reminders of twisted accusations, but their power had waned. She had confronted, refuted, and ultimately conquered them. Kale's fingers tightened around hers. "You brought this back, Alara. You saved us." His gaze, usually composed with royal bearing, now blazed with naked admiration and a deeper emotion that quickened her pulse. With a weary smile, Alara shook her head. "We did this together. You were there, every step. I couldn't have managed it on my own." A low chuckle rumbled from him, like wind rustling through leaves. "Perhaps, but it was your inner fire that drove back the darkness, your resilience that held the corruption at bay." He swept his hand, encompassing the thriving woodland. "This is your enduring legacy, Alara." They walked on in comfortable quiet, their passage barely disturbing the newly awakened undergrowth. Tiny creatures, emboldened by the blight's retreat, shyly emerged from their burrows, darting across their path. Alara felt a surge of warmth, a profound connection to the whisperwood that resonated within her very core. It was as if the forest exhaled a sigh of contentment, drawing her back into its embrace. They arrived at a clearing overlooking a valley awash in wildflowers. A crystalline stream tumbled down the rock face, its gentle cadence a calming melody. Alara eased herself onto a moss-covered boulder, her weary limbs finally giving way. Kale settled beside her, his gaze drawn to the distant horizon. "The fight isn't over. Though banished, the blight's residue remains. We must ensure it never takes root again." Alara nodded, following his line of sight. "How so?" "The whisperwood is fragile still. Its creatures are timid. They need guidance, reassurance, a shield, a protector." He turned, his gaze locking with hers, an intensity that stole her breath. "They need you, Alara." She glanced at her hands, scarred and toughened from their trials. "Me? I'm just Alara, a banished villager, an outsider. You are infinitely more than that," Kale declared, his voice resonating with conviction. "You are Shadowborn. You command power unlike any I've ever witnessed, and you've proven yourself worthy." You are the Whisperwood's guardian, Alara. Embrace your calling. His words struck a chord deep within her, igniting a spark. She recalled her parents, their sacrifice, the web of deceit she had unraveled, but she also remembered the kindness she had been shown, Kael's unwavering loyalty, the support of the woodland creatures. She thought of the potent light she had unleashed, the energy surging through her veins. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply, extending her senses. The Whisperwood responded, its life force flowing into her, imbuing her with a sense of serenity and purpose. She felt the swaying dance of the trees, the lilting chorus of the birds, the busy chatter of the creatures beneath. She was interwoven with them, bound to them, their destinies entwined. When she opened her eyes, a faint, silver luminescence flickered within them. I accept, she stated, her voice clear and resolute. I am the guardian of the Whisperwood. I will defend it with every fiber of my being. Kael smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression that erased all shadows from his face. I knew you would, he murmured softly. He reached for her hand, his touch sending a shiver of energy through her. But you won't have to bear this burden alone, Alara. He rose, drawing her up with him. He led her to the edge of the clearing, where the valley unfurled before them, bathed in the radiant glow of the setting sun. He turned to face her, his countenance grave. The Whisperwood has lacked true leadership for too long, he stated, his voice imbued with regal authority. My father was absent. I have striven to fill the gap, but it is not enough. The Whisperwood needs a queen. Someone who understands its very soul, embodies its spirit, and is willing to defend it at any cost. He knelt before her, his gaze never wavering. Alara, guardian of the Whisperwood, will you grant me the honor of becoming my queen? Will you stand by my side and help me safeguard our home? Alara gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had never entertained, never dared to dream of such a possibility. She was an outsider, an anomaly, someone who had always been branded as different, as not belonging. And now, the king of the Whisperwood was asking for her hand. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of joy, of release, of disbelief. She reached out, cradling his face in her hands, gently smoothing away the faint lines of worry etched on his brow. Yes, she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Kael, I will be your queen. He rose, pulling her into a close embrace. He held her tight, his warmth enveloping her. Thank you, Alara, he murmured, his voice muffled against her hair. You have made me the most blessed king in all the realms. He drew back slightly, his eyes sparkling with affection. But being queen is more than just bearing a crown and sitting upon a throne. He teased, a hint of mischief in his tone. It demands responsibility, leadership, and difficult decisions. I understand, Alara replied, her voice brimming with resolve. I am prepared. I am ready to be the queen the Whisperwood deserves. He kissed her then, a deep, lingering kiss that sealed their commitment and solidified their bond. It was a kiss imbued with love, with hope, with the promise of a shared future, where they would stand united, protecting their home from any encroaching threat. When they finally parted, Alara gazed out at the valley, no longer seeing it as merely a picturesque landscape, but as a kingdom, a solemn duty, a sacred trust. She was no longer just Alara, the banished villager. She was Alara, guardian and queen of the Whisperwood, Kael's partner. She turned to Kael, her eyes ablaze with newfound confidence. What do we do now? She asked. He smiled, his gaze filled with adoration. Now, he responded, we begin to rebuild. We show the creatures of the Whisperwood that they are sheltered, cherished, and home. And we prepare for whatever trials may lie ahead, knowing that with each other, we can overcome any obstacle. He took her hand, and together, they walked towards the setting sun, prepared to embrace their destiny as the protectors of the Whisperwood, the king and queen of their reborn realm. The weight of the crown felt somehow lighter, shared between them. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would face it as